All right, so almost at the finish line. This is week 6. Next week is your last synchronous class, and the following week is just the wrap up. So, any questions that I can answer about the final couple of hurdles that you have to jump? Everybody's comfortable with everything. Everybody knows exactly what they're doing. Everyone's perfect in every way, just like Mary Poppins, right? Anything exciting happened since last week? No, that was enough excitement for one week, right? So, Meredith.
We have a 3-day weekend.
That's right. Yeah, 3-day weekend,
Every
isn't it?
day, yes.
It's awesome.
That is very positive right now.
Yes. Yes, that will get us over the hump, right? Okay. We're going to do a couple of different things tonight. We're going to do our typical asynchronous discussions. I'm going to put you in discussion groups. After that, I have a presentation on the work of Anthony Muhammad. So I'm going to talk to you about that. I should introduce you to him in a short video, and I'm going to introduce you to the concepts of his belief in how you can change a toxic culture, which is always handy to have some tips on. Then we're going to do our ethical dilemma. So thank you to Darlene for your suggestion. I dug all the way back in my files and I pulled up an ethical dilemma that you did back in 500. And I've got all the notes from the groups. So I'm going to have you do that ethical dilemma again tonight in the same groups that you did them in 500. And we'll work through those. And then when you've worked through all of those, then I will give you your notes from last time to see how different it may be or how similar it may be. So we lost one person in the group since you started. We had Nadia, but we gained Deb, so we'll move Deb into that place. So I think it's going to be interesting and fun. I actually chose, just for all full transparency, I chose week 3 because that was actually the first week that you guys were able to get through the whole thing. The first 2 weeks you never got to the end. So I thought, okay, well, that's the first time that you actually got confident enough that you made it all the way through. So we'll pick that one. So I think you'll enjoy it. So any questions before I start putting you into your breakout groups? No comments. Just let me know you're alive, like breathe heavy or something. So I feel like I'm all alone on this side over here with nobody
I'm
talking to
here.
me.
I'm here, Dr. Spellman. I might be joining from my computer. I was stuck in traffic, so I pulled you on while I was at a stoplight.
Please don't get
So,
a ticket now. All right.
yeah, I'm almost settled and ready to join from my computer.
Okay. All right. Well, we're just getting ready to go into our groups. So let me see if I can get this.
Sounds good.
Uh, okay. I should do this like without putting on the bifocals, right? So that's if I do it this way. Got Deb and Sierra and Gabby. Okay. So why can't, okay. It's giving me a hard time for a minute here. Sorry. It's not letting me put everybody in every room. So I'm gonna have to start over. I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm gonna recreate the rooms because it's probably me talking and doing it at the same time. I want to make sure I've got you in the right groups because these are the groups that you were in um, back in 500. Got it. Okay. All right. So we have last week you had for your asynchronous, you had the whole idea of let's see, you had coherence, which was the work of uh, part 1, Fullen and Quinn. You also had leadership, character, courage. And then you also had that responsible leadership as virtuous leadership. So you have 3 major things to discuss. It's 5:07. I'll kind of pop in and out of the rooms, but try to figure on 10 to 12 minutes um, per per item. And then I'll just kind of keep my finger on the pulse and see how it goes.
And that is something else that we brought up too, is that we don't have like a team leader and we have 6 or 7 sections of each grade
Wow.
level in
Oh,
my
wow.
building. And I said that can be kind of tricky too when we have grade level meetings. Who's facilitating it? Who's making sure that an agenda is being followed? We're staying on target. And certain people kind of just want to take on that role, and other people
Yeah.
feel a little like that they're not getting an opportunity. So
Yeah,
I
because
just made a
you could
suggestion like,
stipend it.
yeah, they could have stipend it, which they did in my last district. Or I
Yeah.
said maybe there could be a responsibility of like taking turns. Like if we're going to have monthly grade levels and there's 6 or 7 of us, why don't we rotate which teacher is leading
True
and
too.
facilitating? And if you don't want to give a stipend to it, and I think that's why they're avoiding it. So that's another part of that coherence thing where I do feel like those are things that could be tightened up or
Yeah,
better.
for sure.
Yeah.
So
So
for number three, you have the great expertise to potentially address this challenge.
That's right.
yes,
It is
yeah,
That is
funny.
surprising you guys are so big but don't have a team leader.
no team leaders. Yep.
This is surprising.
And
Yeah,
I think they may have had something way back before I was brought into the district, and then
uh-huh.
maybe they just did away with it.
Huh.
But I noticed that dynamic immediately when I was hired 4 years ago and was on a kindergarten team. I was like, who's leading this team? Like, and you had a couple of veteran teachers that have been teaching kindergarten for so long, and you'd see some of them kind of because like you could tell they were kind of fighting for it in certain meetings. And I'm like, oh boy. So I just wish things were a little bit more defined and clarified, or it was a rotation of who's going to
Yeah.
lead that month, that meeting, facilitate to share things back maybe with the admin or bring things to the attention that maybe we didn't know was going on. So yeah, I think that could be tightened up too.
I'm sorry, I'm really stuck in the weeds on this one. Who makes up your school leadership team though? Like you have one, yeah?
We have a school improvement team.
Oh.
Uh-huh.
How
And
do you
so
get picked? Like, so they don't have even grade level representatives there?
yes, usually and again, you might miss a teacher here or there, but there is one kindergarten
Mm.
teacher, one first, one
Okay.
second. And then they have a social worker, a special ed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we try to get a variety of people, but they're not considered to be the grade level leader
Got it.
though. Mm-mm.
That's it because it sounds like my school leadership team, but then those people are your leadership reps, so they do have extra responsibilities at
Oh,
grade level. I was just curious. Okay.
yeah. Okay, so that's my little thing. What's the next one that we could discuss?
Of the challenge or the next thing?
We hit everything
Well,
from that first part of the coherence, what's in the building, how would you fix it?
we
Mhm.
went through a bit of that.
Okay.
I like, so what are the intended and unintended
Yeah.
messages the approach we choose will send to the stakeholders?
Ooh, the intended and
Yeah.
unintended. Okay. So if I go back to my first example about how we
Yes.
don't feel that we always know what's happening with like the PTO, PFE,
Mm-hmm.
things that are including our students and our teachers, I would want to bring that back to admin that we just want to make sure that everybody is clear that when new things are brought on or new suggestions are made, that it's communicated also in advance with the teachers via email, a quick meeting, like even if we have to do that at a staff meeting, just
Yeah.
sometimes we feel like we're one of the last ones to find out. And like I said, this readathon was an example of one. And then this art showcase that's being held in March, and we're supposed to compile one piece of artwork, but yet we're not the art teachers, which is fine. But we wish we would have known this in advance. Like we could have started thinking about would we do additional art projects? Would we talk and meet with the art
Right.
teacher? And then how are we selecting what's being brought to the PFE in March? So I would want to just say we want to bring clarification that we feel there's a lack of communication from the PFE and admin down to the teachers because we're finding out at the same time as the parents, it seems like. And
Yeah.
some of the teachers aren't handling that very well. So yes, so and then I even said, yeah, I'd be happy to address that and see how we could tighten that up next year. To make sure that when I'm a part of PFE meetings,
Yeah.
how can I make sure that this new stuff is getting communicated with the teachers easily and clearly?
And Mary, am I
Excuse
hearing it right though?
my ignorance for like an acronym. PFE is parent faculty.
Parents for Education. It's a
Okay.
different version of a PTO.
Okay. So there's no teacher that's a representative on that?
My
That's
understanding,
interesting.
it's the principal that attends, and assistant principal, because right now in our building, there's always two, and usually an AP. I'm not aware of any teachers that are attending because a lot of them are in the morning on a school day,
Okay.
where like they are, when they start planning, it's almost like planning meetings, and it always takes place like say 9 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. And so, yeah, no, teachers are not really
So
involved.
do they take notes? Do they take minutes?
You know what? I would have assumed so, but I've never seen them
Because that would be helpful if they have minutes that could be shared with the faculty
shared
and they
out.
could see that it was on, if they have
Yeah,
agendas and minutes that could be shared,
right.
that would be one way for people to talk about it because no offense, because you're going to be an assistant principal in a few months, but sometimes the assistant principals and principals come back and they don't remember or think to share that information. But if there
Ah,
was
okay.
something that the PFE did, like if they had an agenda or they had minutes, that would be, that's something that you would put the burden on them to share that information.
That would
I
be
don't know.
great. Yeah, that's going to be a suggestion to definitely share and have because we need it. I mean, for the teachers to be talking at lunch today going, we're having a readathon, we're doing a fundraiser and we didn't even know like how we're a part of
Yeah.
this fundraiser. And then there's different
Do they have a calendar of events? If they're, or do they just dream these things up this month and we do it next month?
I
Because
don't know.
sometimes, I'm just thinking, I'm old fashioned, but the PFOs, or we had PTOs. Um,
Yeah.
they had kind of certain events and they had like calendars every month and you knew what was coming,
Yeah.
both,
Yeah.
both as the parents and as the teachers.
Right. And there is one board that is in the hallway. And I felt like you would kind of see, oh, there's a dance going on. There's a bingo night, a grand, yes, like certain things that have been standard you would see. But we felt like this one was kind of out of left field. Like we didn't know about this one. And I don't know if I maybe missed it on the board or what from looking at it. But it was just when there's a whole table of us second grade teachers
Yeah,
and going,
multiple people
Yeah.
wait a minute,
have no
how is this
idea.
working? And what happens when they earn so much money? And everyone's like, well, let's just look over that flyer again tomorrow on the half day when the students are dismissed. That's something we could do as a team and look at it. But like, why, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like,
It's a
why are we having
communication issue. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is. And so
Definitely a
that's why I said
communication.
that coherent. Yes, it is a communication issue. And I was like, okay, that's when they looked at me. They're like, all right, so future AP, how you can talk about fixing that for us next year because this isn't working for us. I said I should go and carry a
Yeah.
clipboard around with me now when I go to lunch and whatnot, just to take some notes because they've got some good
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That's a good point. Yeah, no, but you should fix that because that's a small thing to fix, but it's a
Yes.
big thing. Like it's like the pea and the princess and the pea and the mattress. That's gonna rub people the wrong way for other things. Yeah,
So true.
not worth it. Not worth it. Yeah.
Hmm.
Did anybody else have challenges from their groups that they were going to share?
I was going to say ours is our transition into standards-based grading, and we're getting a new principal next year. So, like our current capacity for finding a solution, we're kind of feeling like, well, do we keep pushing ahead right now? Are we going to wait for the new principal to kind of share their vision because, it could be something totally different or, put us in a new direction? Um, and I really think we need to like bring in someone because we're so small. Bring in an external someone who's an expert on this because a lot of us, I mean, I've been through this before, but again, I'm not a classroom teacher anymore. So just are feeling have taught in this district their entire career in the same room by themselves, so like the thought of changing to the standards-based grading is completely foreign. Middle school keeps saying like, well, maybe middle school won't do it. We're like, we have to decide this. Yeah, we really need to build that capacity so we can sustain this because I just worry it's just going to keep being put on the back burner until all of a sudden admin's like, well, we're doing it now. And then we have no like plan in place.
Okay.
That's where we are.
We're kind of sending the message to parents that like they can just continue doing not doing.
Mhm.
what they're doing because we'll take care of it in the classroom. So it's like, oh yeah, that's fine. Like you don't have to do it. Like we got it. We'll do it. And that's just adding so much to the plates of our teachers when their plates are already overflowing. And then it's also sending the message to parents that like we no longer have faith in them. And we've just kind of thrown our hands in the air and been like, well, you showed us that you're not going to help out and you're not going to do anything. So we're not even going to try to continue to involve you in education and partner with you. So
Yeah, you don't want to let them off the hook because that's not good
exactly.
either.
Exactly. So we're trying to create some ways of like, how can we easily involve our parents,
Mhm.
but not make it seem like it's so much that they
Yeah.
have, that they're doing, but just like real little things. So like things that teachers are starting to put into their newsletters, just like little tips for parents, like, hey, we're working on our basic multiplication facts. Um, have your child, run through them while you're in the car. Here's some links to these videos that you can watch with your kids, like if you're, if they're on YouTube, if they're on their tablet, because like we know screen time is huge for them when they're not at school. So we're trying to work with that mentality instead of trying to fight against it. Our kindergarten teachers put together like during conferences for fall, they put together like care packages to send home. So like the parents got a dry erase board with their name, like their child's name is on it, which is like real cute, and like a dry erase marker. And then they got letter cards, like lowercase letters, and they got uppercase letters. And then they got like 10 frames. And then the kindergarten teachers did a lesson with the parents on what a 10 frame is. So like we're trying to do real little things. So not completely let them off the hook, but
Mhm.
at the same time, still try to get that partnership,
Do you
with
do
them.
anything with having the parents read with the kids?
So we have quite a few EL families, and so some of our older EL students recorded themselves reading books in their native language. And so we sent home videos of them and we were like, watch this with your child. And some of our like English speaking parents were like, we watched the Russian we watched the Russian video and it was so fascinating. And now my kid wants to learn Russian. And like it was really cute, just a way for us to, bring in more. And our first grade teachers, and our second grade teachers do a great job in conferences talking with parents about what literacy can look like at home. Sitting with your child and you reading a page and they'll read a page, or you read a paragraph, they read a paragraph. And then ask these like real basic questions like who's in the story, where is the story located, just very very basic to help parents. And so we're like, if your child can do these things, like they are right where they should be, and that's just going to help them further. It's like we don't expect you to sit down with your kid and find the theme of
No.
the story, or like you don't need to go through like main idea and supporting details, but like hey, tell me about what you're reading, or tell me about your book that you're reading, or what's going on in your book, what's happening, who are the characters, tell me about them, just like real
And
simple.
just having them have them read to their parents, like read from their book to their parents. I mean, the research is out there that the best way to become a better reader is to read, right? So the more they
Yep.
read, the better they'll read. And
Yep.
so just getting them to read to their parents and read regularly, if you can increase the amount of time they're reading, it's going to be powerful. Yeah.
Do you do any like parent workshops on literacy or math where people come in and
So we have just this year we have like a literacy night where we have an author that comes and like does a presentation and then gives books away, signed books away to students, which is really cool. So we have like a huge attendance with that. And so this year, adding on to that, we did a parent workshop to talk through like our phonics for our primary students, in our primary families, just talking about like our curriculum that we use and, what is phonics instruction. And then our intermediate families received like a fluency practice, like how we do 6-minute solutions is our fluency resource that we use. And so we just talked about like repeated readings and how like if they get home, we always have they're always coming home with some kind of like a passage that they read that day with like questions. It's like if you could just have them reread that passage to you, and just like those repeated readings will help them so much when it, comes time for our 1-minute assessments and things like that. And then I know we have a math day coming up in the spring. And for that, we're going to do parent workshops, and we're going to show them how they can use games that they already
Mhm.
have in their house to practice like math. So like for kindergarten, we're going to show like how just using dice, just to have them roll dice and like add them together. Like
Yeah.
really, really simple. And then we're going to give families like dice to take home so that they have that resource at their house. And then like our intermediate grades there, we're going to show how you can take, the game of Candyland and just have your kid, solve a simple math problem, and then they can choose and then they can play. And then so you're incorporating that whole like idea of being with as a family. You're all playing this game, and the game is really easy, but you're just adding in some math practice with that.
We used to do cards all the time
Yeah.
with my
Yeah.
son who loves math. So every
Yes,
time we were anywhere,
playing cards.
let's multiply these, let's do this. So
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. My husband used to play cards with the kids all the time. You play like the game 21 where you the first one who could get added up to 20. So, they're adding and all of that kind of thing. And what
Yes.
you do is like if you're playing as a family, then the younger ones automatically they get it. They start, I remember the oldest one was really working hard on his multiplication tables. This is a long time ago. And he would always get stuck at a certain one. I think it was like 9 times 7. And I remember one day we're at the table, we're going through them, and we come to 9 times 7, and he just froze. And the little one across the room goes, 63.
that's
And
awesome.
they just by osmosis and listening to us drill him, they had it.
Well, I mean, it is true. My third grader is doing multiplication right now, and so we're running through his facts. My kindergartner, I mean, he now knows his multiplication facts. I'm like, awesome.
Yeah, they're listening. They want to, they pretend like they're not, but they want to know what's going on there. And
Yeah.
yeah, kind of blow you away a little bit. But yeah, my husband always tells the stories because he grew up in very rural Ireland, and literally like a 3-room schoolhouse, and you sat by rows by your ages and stuff. And he said, the younger ones were, always learning from, listening to what's going on over 3 rows over or whatever, so it's like you could, if you were anyway good with auditory and that, you were golden by the time you moved to the next row because you'd already heard all that. So it's all good stuff. Good stuff. What question are you on?
Well, I spoke through all of the coherence for my school, and then now Sarah's doing hers. So
Okay. All right. I'm a fly on the wall. I'll be quiet.
Are we ready to move on to the next thing?
Yes.
Do you want to do responsible leadership or the moral courage one?
do the moral courage one.
Yeah.
I loved question number 1. How would you define moral courage? And is it a distinct virtue or a combination of others? So for me, moral courage is having the ability to make decisions and lead your life morally, no matter who is looking or who is there. So do I think it's a distinct virtue? No, I think it's a necessary combination. I don't think if you're living your life morally and making decisions based on your morals, no matter what is going on, you need courage to do that.
For the whole district.
And even right now with like our supposed UBD rollout that's happening, we are currently learning it right now. I was part of it. I'm not part of the writing anymore because they had asked me to do it, but I'm like, you got to take something off my plate. I can't do 10 things at once.
Yeah,
Um,
juggling too much.
yeah, and because they wanted me to keep up my coaching, I'm like, you want me to write a curriculum too? Um,
By
we're learning it
yourself, you
now.
were doing that?
No, we're in committees, but
Oh,
I was
okay.
like the only bilingual one, and they didn't have
Mm,
any teachers can, get paid and whatnot.
hmm.
But that's the other piece to this is that teachers don't want to participate in committees because they want somebody else to do it for them.
Yeah, that's like for my curriculum writing committee. I was under the impression when I signed up, and I would have signed up regardless because it's my department and like I think that we need new curriculum anyways.
Yeah.
But
So a lot of learning you can always get
I
from that.
yeah, but I thought like we were going to be paid additionally, and we're only paid additionally if we are working like if we have meetings after
Well,
school. And
yes,
so most of our meetings take place during school, which I mean, whatever, like I'm either doing that or I'm in my classroom doing my normal job.
right.
So like it's fine, but how it was originally like framed, I don't know if I misread it, but even the other people in my committee said the same. They also were under that impression. I was like, oh, bummer. Like
We
I
were,
thought I
yeah.
was like, oh, this will be nice, a little extra money for daycare. Like,
No, so we started doing committees like after school a little bit, and then that's where you get paid, but then nobody wanted to do that. So then they changed it
yeah.
up and integrated it during school days.
Hmm.
And then we had teachers drop out because they're like, well, we can't find a sub, or I don't want to be out, or it's not the best day for me to do it. And we're working K through 5. So we were getting individual, this grade this day, so it wasn't
Yeah.
everybody at once. Um,
Yeah, that's
and
tough.
yeah,
My school's very like accommodating with that. Like we if we don't have enough in like building subs, people can pick up like a class and when like you get paid extra. So like if I pick up a class, I get like $33 or something like
yeah,
that because it's like a
right,
40-minute
yeah.
class.
Right now I'm an internal sub as well.
Oh yeah, on top of your I forgot you said
Yep.
that before too. It's
Yep.
crazy.
So because I'm at school, I'm not going to get paid extra. So we kind of said, well, then I apologize, but then my job, what I would normally do, I can't finish that day because I took
Yeah.
responsibility.
Our
Um,
instructional coaches would still get paid additionally if they internally sub because
mm,
like our principal had to designate like 40 minutes worth of like a plan time for them. And so then like if they get called to sub during like their what would be their plan time, then they like so everyone has
Interesting.
like two plan periods and then their lunch period. So that's how I guess that's how they figure that out. Because otherwise, like typical instructional coach's schedule is kind of like wide open depending on if you're doing like a
Right.
coaching cycle with somebody
Right.
or co-teaching something,
It's the most
obviously,
flexible one. Like,
but
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I never know where I'm at
Anyways, we
gonna
got
be.
off on a tangent.
Yeah.
We were talking,
Um,
we're in the article
assumptions.
section, Dr. Spellman. We were
Now we're in
talking
the
about
assumptions.
question one.
Is this the first one you've been tackling, or did you do some of the others already?
We did the other two already,
Oh,
the
you did. Okay. You're
courage
moving.
and what is it called? Coherence.
Okay.
So we just started talking about the article.
So Sierra, you're in a junior high, right? Or a middle school. Where
Yeah,
are
I'm in a
you?
middle school.
Gabby, where are you?
Elementary, first to third.
Yeah. So that's why I'm thinking like Sierra's got the two plan periods and the lunch period because that goes more on
Yeah.
the middle school schedule. How about you, Deb?
Yeah, middle school, same, but if we sub at any point, plan or not, we get paid extra for that. I don't we don't have instructional coaches, so I don't know. And we did for a while and they never subbed, so I don't know.
I think it's a different world in the elementary. I mean, I've taught in both, so I mean, and I've been in leadership in both, and it's a different. Elementary teachers might get no break, no specials on
Mhm.
one day and two on another, and so it's not that. The middle school people have almost a high school type of vision or perspective kind of thing. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks so
My
much.
mom works in an elementary, so like we talk about it a lot too, because she's an exploratory um class. And so like if she's out, she still has to write plans, but like that doesn't always mean that someone's going to be able to cover her class. And then I guess the classroom teacher, if they don't get to go to their like special, then the classroom teacher gets like paid a little extra for the day or something.
Wow.
So it's just interesting to talk to like other teachers that are in different like grade spans and everything in their buildings because a lot of schools do
Yeah.
things differently.
And it sounds like a lot of this has been determined contractually, right?
Yeah. hmm
My
We're
first
also in negotiations this year. So.
my first year teaching, this is just a small, but I was teaching in a small private Catholic school. You don't get paid extra for anything. It's like, it was crazy. I mean, you just, there, and then when I moved to a public school, I thought I died and gone to heaven. I had no idea you could actually like have that, reimbursement for things that you did. I mean, I literally, was almost felt like I was still in school with the nuns telling us what to do and whatnot, that kind of thing. It's like, oh,
hmm
different world.
Definitely, yeah.
All right, so we're number 2 now. The
Yes.
assumption that an inclination exists in all human beings towards moral goodness.
I don't know how you guys set up your notes on this one, but I just like broke it down into like the 3 different ones and like just kind of said like whether I agreed with that particular one and like just like jotted
Yeah,
a couple of things about.
I wrote
Okay.
under.
Okay. Yeah, same.
Yeah. Just for me, it's hard
I
to
don't even
get
know how to say
kind of
this.
district is hard. I do agree with this. I do. I believe that everybody naturally wants to do what is correct, what is right. And just we're here for the students, whether it's somebody else's class, we're here for all students. So we're going to help each other. But, sometimes I get stuck in my mind, and I think it's because when I left the classroom, it opened my eyes a little bit of I was doing everything correct and right, but so many people are not right now, or like they can complain more to union about certain things. I'm like, we can go to union about that? Can't we? I thought we just had to do it. So for me, it's a little different, my view now. Because I thought, why wouldn't you do that? That is best practice. Why wouldn't you bring up a student if you see that he's not growing? Why are you waiting for somebody to tell you that, hey, what do you think? Do you think you should bring him up? Things like that. So I struggle a little bit with answering, but at the end of the day, I do believe that everybody wants to do what's right and they show empathy towards others. Although they don't always act morally correct, I think.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of emotion in certain things or what they believe is right or what they're stuck in certain ways of how we used to do things or our culture, I guess. Like instructional coaching, it has been a very hard thing to bring to our district. And it puts us in a very hard situation because none of my teams that I used to be part of teaching, I've taught K through 3rd in my district. All different teams, they all had their things, right? But they don't all see me the same anymore. So it's a
You moved to
double-edged
the dark
sword.
side.
I know. And they just don't believe that I'm rooting for us. Like I try to do everything, but I am a morally like I see big picture. I don't see A grade level only.
Yes.
That's funny.
It was very humorous.
Oh, we missed that.
All right.
Be two of the article. Moving on.
Mm-hmm.
Agreeing with the 3 assumptions proposed in this article. Why or why not? So the first one, the assumption that an inclination exists in all human beings toward moral goodness.
So
I said I agree because most people are good, is what I've always told my children.
yes. We all have the capacity, at least for goodness.
Yes, 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 yes.
But I even think about teachers. Like we've had, teachers. It's a hard position. There's a reason I was not ever a teacher. My mom was a teacher 35 years, but it's really hard work. But even when I see like teachers who are having a tough time or maybe like aren't always student centered, I really don't think it's not out of like, I still think they're trying to do what they believe is good. Like I think most people truly are good, even if they're having a tough time or maybe don't seem to always make the right decisions. But yeah. Although there are some teachers that have not been great in my lifetime, but it's okay.
Ugh.
What about you all for the first bullet, I
Well,
should say.
thinking about, I guess, like on the kids side, like, well, we see early, like, that there are signs of kids recognizing, like, what's fair, like fairness, and empathy. Like, kids can also recognize, maybe when someone's having a bad time or they look sad, like, there's empathy. So, definitely, students, showing that they're capable of kindness. So, I would say definitely in agreement there.
It's fair
But
to look at the
obviously
young ones.
there's the need to still model and to provide the reinforcement for sure.
For sure.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I
that's
was saying like I think, they all have it, but like it depends on
it just needs to be flourished,
nurtured, yeah, in the
nurtured,
environment
flourished, reinforced. Yep.
and demonstrated like modeled for them.
Absolutely.
And in adults too.
Oh yeah.
Is it
Yep.
modeled for you?
The
Or does
second
someone hold you
the
accountable?
second one, the assumption that virtuousness represents inherent value. It is not a means to obtain another end, it is but is considered to be an end in itself. That felt like a mouthful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I
So
have to.
being virtuous, not a tool to get something else.
Oh yeah.
Just you're being virtuous to be
To-
virtuous. Because it's
Right. Like not using it as an instrument to benefit
yeah.
yourself, because then it's
Correct.
not virtuous. So being
I
kind in a moment for your own gain isn't really kindness at all.
Mhm.
That's right.
Yep.
So I said yes to that one.
Agree. All right. And then the assumption that virtuousness creates and fosters sustainable positive energy. So, right,
That's a
when I think it's the modeling, right? So if you see that others around you are being courageous or acting with, being compassionate or acting with integrity, you're like, oh, okay, that's what we do here. So that's what we should do, right? Like you see it modeled, so then you're going to do it.
Yeah. Leadership.
Um, I don't know what I'm doing right now. Okay. I'm better. Thank you. So it says the author discusses the difference between virtuous and the concept of ethics. Do you agree with her arguments on page 27?
I do think there is a difference. I was thinking about how I wrote in my notes, ethics are about doing what is best, and being virtuous enables like the ability to have like trust and collaboration. So they kind of go together, but they're still not the same. If that makes sense.
Mhm.
Like you can't have the ethics without the virtuousness because you need to be able to trust with the people that you're working with in order to do what is best.
Agreed. Yeah, and something in here that where it says somewhere where oh, here it is, where the says a dominant, although not exclusive, emphasis is on the leadership's ethics, literature on avoiding harm, fulfilling contracts, ensuring compliance, and obeying rules and laws. So taking that into into the practice where it says, you know, we understand and we implement these as duties, but then I went back to, is that virtuous? Is those, do you use your virtues? Do you use your ethics? And again, I came to, you need both of those.
There's
That
some
makes sense.
scholars would argue that there's a big difference between ethics and being ethical and being moral. Have you ever thought about that?
Yes, and I always hold them like almost, they're so similar in my mind. And I think that I need help differentiating what is a moral thing and what is an ethical.
So one of the arguments out there is that ethics are situational because they can change from context to context, from discipline to discipline, from scenario to scenario. But your morals, you think something that is moral is like inherently there, and it doesn't change regardless of the circumstances or the context or the scenario.
It becomes a fixed, personification of yourself.
Becomes your North Star. But, like you could have ethics, in one, in establish like a set of ethics, a code of ethics for a profession, but that's decided by the profession, and it might not be the same ethics that would be applied to another profession. So, ethics, and some people could say, well, to be ethical here, is this, but over here it would be different to be ethical in this way. So that's just one of the scholars' arguments that I'm always kind of intrigued with, but they talk about that ethics can change depending on the situation. But your morals, if something, to decide whether or not something's ethical, I think you kind of hit it there with your comment, Meredith. It really is dependent on what's happening, right? And the parameters. But if you're deciding if something is moral, it doesn't matter what the context is, that you've got that moral compass, you've got that North Star that's telling you, yeah, this is moral or it's not. But it could be, could be ethical. Ethics is very situational, like, according to these arguments.
I thought about like if something is unethical, I think it's unethical because of a law, because of a contract, because of, like for teachers, like it's unethical for us to um um
Block
disclose
off
like
4 hours.
huh?
A block
Block
off
off
time.
4 hours.
Yes. Yes. Block off 4 hours so that we're not, in contact with parents during parent-teacher conferences. Or it's unethical for us to disclose our like political affiliation if we're in like a government class. Like you teach government and let kids know like, oh, I'm hardcore Republican. Like that is not ethical because that class you should just be presenting, both sides. But is it immoral to do that? Like I don't think it's immoral, but if something is immoral, it's like immoral in life context. Like it is, I can't think of an example off the top of my head of something that is immoral because my brain is not functioning at full capacity tonight.
But
But
you're approaching it from the immoral and unethical, whereas we were talking about is it something is moral or ethical? There's a
right,
difference. Yeah.
right, right.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
That
it's
was
very
helpful, clearing
interesting.
my brain.
Don't clear it too much. We need to use it for tonight.
And she was even like so worried about the test, and
They're not easy, but
no,
I feel like
really
I wish we had more people.
what?
I wish we had more people, like even administrators. We struggled. Right now we have two that are bilingual. Before that, we only had like one. And it was always like, as a classroom teacher, it's like, oh, can you come translate? Or can you come say this? Like our administrators struggled. And if they didn't speak Spanish and the student family only spoke Spanish, I'd meet with the principal or AP, and then I'd have to make the phone call. So it still ended up kind of on me. So I wish we had more administrators. Plus, it also just it it helps our building. It helps students see administrators that speak Spanish. So we are very fortunate right now to have two. Because I will speak Spanish in the hallways to the kids, even though some don't understand it because we have mono and dual all intermixed in the building. But yeah, I didn't know before a few years that it was really hard to find bilingual administrators.
Yeah, I know. That's why I was like, if I super dive into Spanish again, I was like, I'd probably have a leg up, you know. But
Yeah,
I
I
don't know if
do. Even if it's a little bit, I truly like as a classroom teacher, if even knew a little bit, like just to get by, like it it means a lot to the teachers, to the students. It connects really well.
yeah.
Is your school primarily Spanish speaking, or do you have a lot of other
Um,
languages as well?
we have a lot of other languages. Now we started, I think, an Arabic. Um, we haven't
Yeah, we
started
have
an Arabic dual, but we have an Arabic teacher now. And we have still now our ESL services have changed this year where it's either complete pullout because we have so many. So maybe the ESL teaches the core of language arts, and some are just push in, or yeah, some are just push in. And then we have the dual language program, which is a two-way Spanish English,
Right.
K through middle school.
Yeah, I think that the challenge that really gets messy is when you've got children and families that speak Arabic, speak, perhaps Greek or Lithuanian or Polish
Yeah.
or and Spanish, and then how can you translate all of these languages and
Yeah.
experts from
I
all?
had some students that were trilingual in my dual classes, and it was interesting for me because sometimes I didn't know, and they're like, "Oh yeah, on the weekends, they speak Polish, or they're going to Polish school or something like that." I'm like, "Oh my God, that's so cool." But they mainly communicated in English with me. But it was interesting because you see how the students are using all their different languages of what they know. So it's just really cool.
Yeah,
It
and
just
and, and
brings
it's
culture into the building, into everybody.
and when they're at the elementary level, that's when it really needs to take place because
Correct. Yeah.
I want to get that going. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you finished with all of the questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Close. I think the other groups are they're almost there, so I'll probably call you back in a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything I can answer while I'm here?
Yeah, I'm gonna log off on my phone and log in on my computer. So you might have to like,
I'll let you
let me
back
in.
in. Okay. Okay, so some interesting conversations. Is there anything from your group that was an aha moment or something that was interesting or something that you think would be beneficial for the group to hear about? Any interesting summaries of your deep thoughts? And I'm a teacher, I have wait time.
Our group had a really good conversation about the courage discussions and what moral courage is, and is it a distinct virtue or a combination of others? And we talked about, what our moral compass is and how that um, might our moral compass stays the same, but depending on where we are situationally, that courage could change. Like, so some of us might sit back depending on who we're around and not have the courage to speak up versus when you're with, your group of your good friends, you're going to speak your mind. So that was a great conversation that we had.
And sometimes just the opposite. You need to have the courage to stay silent. Anything
I
else?
do not. I like to stay silent. Other people, perhaps.
Other comments or other things that came up in your conversation? I know many of you were drawing on personal situations from your workplace and things. You don't want the other group to benefit from your conversations. My. Okay. All right. Well, it's 2 minutes to 6. So why don't we take a 12-minute break, get yourself something to snack on, get up and move around, come back at 6:10, and we will dig into the work of Dr. Anthony Muhammad. Start this up. I think we're almost all back. Here we go. Isabel, I think, is back. I think she just got in, so she's joining us also. Right. Okay.
I'm here.
Here you are. That's a cool background. What is that?
It's my bedroom. My
Oh.
mom painted when I was younger. So I'm 25 years old and still won't change it.
That's very cute. I like it. Love that. It's very nice. Well, I'm going to introduce you tonight to Dr. Anthony Muhammad. Have any of you seen any of his podcasts, his webinars, read his books? Not at all. Okay. Well, I think it's a little bit of a segue from some of the things that you were talking about in the first hour of class. Because I heard people talking in a couple of different instances about things that were happening that they felt were like toxic situations, right? And so he's really someone who has been, for the last couple of, maybe a last decade or more, really speaking out on how do we change the culture in some of these schools. So I'm going to introduce you to him at first by just a real short video. So let me get started with that. So we can skip the ad. Let's see what we can do here.
We develop terminology to be accurate. What is something that's toxic? What would make something toxic? If there was a toxic field near this convention center, if you wanted to plant a tree in that toxic field, what would happen to that tree? It would die. If you wanted to plant an ear of corn, it would die. Well, what would a toxic school culture look like? A place where educational reforms find their graveyard. That no matter how good the idea is, the environment becomes so toxic that even the best idea never gets fully implemented. And that's why he used that terminology. What is a toxic culture? It's a place where educators believe that student success is based solely upon a student's level of concern, attentiveness, prior knowledge, and willingness to comply with the demands of school. And they pass that on to others in overt and covert ways. Let's stop. Again, we have a belief system being evoked. But in a toxic culture, does it appear, and I want to ask you a question, I want you to think about this. If you read that first part of this definition, does it seem as if learning is impossible in a toxic culture? If you think yes, raise your hand. If you think no, raise your hand. So those who raised their hand and said learning is possible in a toxic culture, you're right. But there seems to be a big list of prerequisites. If you care, if you pay attention, if your parents read to you when you were little, if you do what I tell you to do. Now, are any of those characteristics bad characteristics? Absolutely not. If every child that walked into your classroom cared, paid attention, had background knowledge, and did exactly what we told them to do, this conference probably wouldn't even be necessary. But unfortunately, they don't all walk in the door like that. So what does it seem that a toxic culture does? They explain away their difficulties based upon if students have certain characteristics or don't. So they're totally external, extrinsically motivated staff who says, if these things happen, then students will have an opportunity to learn. How would a healthy culture attack those issues? They would figure out what do we need to do to develop these characteristics in students so that they can learn. What's interesting about the difference between a healthy and a toxic culture is this. It's not that healthy cultures have fewer problems. Healthy cultures attack their problems differently, and toxic cultures explain their problems away.
Any thoughts on his comments there? You're killing me. You're talking so much tonight.
We had data review meetings the past 2 days, and we started our data review with a brain dump of all of the things that are out of our control. Because sometimes when we start talking about students and we start talking about data and test scores, we like to bring in all of the reasons why, like there's the lack of home life, they're not doing their homework, they're not, when they come to school, their mood isn't great. Like we like to kind of bring in all of those things, and then we get stuck in the weeds when we're trying to problem solve certain situations and certain students. using those as excuses as to like why not, instead of focusing on like, okay, yeah, that might be true, but what can we do? So we started off every meeting with that brain dump, and we found ourselves at times being like out of our control, and we would reference our brain dump of the things, and then we would get back to trying to figure out, okay, what can we do? What could be a solution to this problem? Except for one grade level. There was one grade level that continually tried to go back to what was out of our control. And we were, as a leadership team, we were reflecting on that, of why that's the case. And it ended up kind of an understanding that there's a little bit of some fixed mindsets within that grade level. And we try every year, and that, when we understand that that's going to be the case, and that's why we did the brain, we started off our meetings with that brain dump to try and be a little bit more productive. And even with those, that teacher trying to kind of bring that into the conversation each time, it still ended up being a very productive conversation, because we were able to kind of be like, oh, out of our control. Like, yes, all of those things are true, but they are out of our control. So what can we do? How can we fix that problem to not revert back to that toxic culture, but be
Or
more.
even just that escape culture. I know, even with my family, I
Yeah.
always do that thing with the concentric circles. Like, this is how much we can control. This is how much we can influence.
Right.
Gotta let go of the rest, and let's focus on what we can control and what we can influence. And I think that's a really perfect segue into what we're going to talk about tonight. So I'm going to introduce you to the work of Anthony Muhammad, and I'm going to have you bear with me while I get this started. Okay. So Anthony Muhammad is he's a very well-known educational consultant. That obviously that little video was a few years old. He was a practitioner for over 20 years. He served as a middle school teacher, assistant principal, and a principal, as well as a high school principal. His tenure really, as a practitioner, he earned a lot of awards, especially as a teacher and as a principal. But his the accomplishment he really talks most about, that he considers the most notable, was when he was the principal of a middle school in Southfield, Michigan. And they became a national school of excellence, where the student proficiency on the state assessment scores more than doubled in the 5 years that he and his staff were there, because they focused on the PLCs, the professional learning communities, as their school improvement plan. From 2004, though, to 2007, I don't know if this was part of his doctoral work or if it was, a follow-up on his research, but he did a research project where he conducted both formal and informal observations in 34 different schools all across the United States. He wanted to look at how the staff in these schools functioned in their community, and whether or not their behavior were things that supported positive change or hindered change. And looking in terms of the change he was trying to make, is change that would be favorable conditions for student achievement. So the schools that he worked with were in every geographical area of the country. There were 11 different elementary schools, 14 different middle schools, and 9 high schools. And a lot of his findings really shed a light on what we know about toxic school culture. And he really focuses a lot on how we can even overcome this kind of staff division, and how we can actually, try to turn these schools around. So when he talks about these schools, he emphasizes that he found, if you as a leader lead holistically, and you understand that there are variables in an unhealthy learning environment, and you can arm yourself with strategies to uproot those and replace those toxic elements, then as a leader, you can be successful in creating that positive and healthy learning environment. I mean, hopefully you're seeing the theme that's kind of unfolding here from the work that you did in your teamwork. He noticed that in the 34 schools that he worked at, he really found what he called a war of belief systems. And he found 4 distinct groups. He thought 2 of those groups were kind of engaged in a battle trying to make their belief system, the norm of the school. He said one of them, a third group, were really kind of in the center of the battle. And then there was a 4th group that were just trying to survive the school day. Now, he talks about how these 4 groups had a divisive impact on the school culture. You can see on the screen here, he talks about the believers. And the believers, we're going to dig into these more deeply, but just as an overview, they're the ones who believe in the core values that make up a healthy school culture. They believe that all their students are capable of learning and that they, as teachers, have a direct impact on student success. And they're constantly kind of engaged in a constant battle with the ones you see at the bottom, the fundamentalists. Um, the tweeners are the ones that Mohammed calls this group, and he talks about two different types of tweeners, but basically he said these are the educators who are new to the school culture. So they're either brand new teachers who are coming into the profession for the first time, or they might be someone who's moving from one school to another school. So they're new to the context. And he talks about their experience as kind of like the honeymoon period, where they're spending time trying to learn the norms and the expectations. But sometimes they get caught in the middle between that war that's going on between the believers and the fundamentalists. The last group that he talks about, well, the third group that he really digs into is the survivors. And I think we all have probably witnessed these survivors. They tend to be a very small group of teachers who are absolutely totally burned out. They're so overwhelmed by the demands of the profession that they actually probably suffer from a form of depression. They basically survive from day to day. And honestly and truly, education is not the profession for these people. Um, the fourth group is the fundamentalists. And the fundamentalists are interesting because these are people who are not only opposed to change, but they organize and resist and push back against any change initiative. And they have a lot of political power. They could be a major obstacle for any leadership team that's really trying to implement what we would call meaningful school reform. So along this same vein, one of the things that I'd like you to look at are the terms that you see on this screen, because these are kind of the characteristics that have come out of the research of what you find in a positive school culture. Now, Muhammad says that these four groups that he's defined have a real divisive impact on the school culture, and that he really feels that in order to move from a toxic to a healthy learning environment, we have to influence the change within these groups of educators. And so we have to look at these characteristics here. And the ones on the screen here were done from a research by Butler and Dickinson. And they, over time, they identified these 12 characteristics of powerful and positive school cultures. So just for a minute, I'd like you to take a look at those 12 and think about it and jot down for yourself. If you see this in your school, do you see collegiality? Do you see people engaging in experimentation? Do you find that people in general have high expectations? Is there trust and confidence in each other? Can you feel the support? Is it there? Is it tangible? Do people reach out to different knowledge bases? Is there appreciation and recognition, caring and celebration, even a sense of humor? Are teachers and staff involved in the decision making? Is there a place in there where the atmosphere is protecting those things that are important? Does the atmosphere there, the culture there, honor traditions? And is there open and honest communication? So looking at those, jot down which ones really jump out at you as, yes, this is happening in my place, because we're going to come back and talk about this. Okay. So let's dig into who these people are and what these different little characters are that he's kind of labeled into different categories. So the believers are really a group that he defines from his research as people they really possess the ability to achieve high levels of student performance, and they find great satisfaction in the classroom, often more than their colleagues do. They really are committed to student success. Most of the time, these are like seasoned educators, which would we say at least 3 years of teaching, but they really have made a decision to be student-centered, and that's their primary mode of operation. So they have high levels of intrinsic motivation. They have some kind of a deep personal connection to the school and the community. They're flexible. They really do understand how you can apply positive student pressure to help students perform. They are willing to confront opposing viewpoints. And one of the things that was interesting is that even though we think of these as kind of the positive people in the building, the believers, they have a wide range of pedagogical skills. Some were really strong teachers with lots of things in their toolbox and strategies, and some were kind of mediocre. But the feeling it was that these people had the mindset that the ultimate goal is for student success, academically, socially, emotionally. And they are willing to work with others to accomplish this goal for their students. These kinds of people are the ones that you find on the SIP teams. You'll find them on curriculum initiative committees. They volunteer for committees. They don't feel threatened by change. And if they feel it will improve student performance, they will actually embrace change. Now, when we talk about some of the things with these believers, one of the things that's really common with them is this intrinsic motivation, which is a wonderful quality when you think about it. And Muhammad noted that when he was interviewing the principals in all these 34 buildings, he asked them all the same question. If you were going to start an initiative that provided extra benefit for students, but required teachers to do some work outside of the contract day, which teachers could you count on to participate? Just kind of a loaded question. And we know that this happens in schools, right? There are times when people are tapped on the shoulder and they have to do work outside of the school day and they're really not being compensated for it. And as he gathered this data over the time he spent with these 3 years going through these 34 schools, he found that the principal's answers as to who those people were correlated by 90% of the time with the same staff members that Muhammad had already identified as belonging to the believers. So these are the teachers who make themselves available. And sometimes they are the ones that actually seek out opportunities to contribute if they see something that they think is positively going to affect their students. Their consistency and their drive doesn't depend on the influence of the leadership. So their perception of their leaders ranged from everything from really low, didn't have much of an opinion, to being really, believing that their leader was exceptional. So there was no difference in their performance or their consistency or their drive depending on the leadership. And there wasn't even a detectable difference of them, whether or not they were in a high-performing school or a low-performing school. But we found things like that, they really have solid attendance. They participate voluntarily, engage in professional development. Often they have memberships in other professional organizations. And these are kind of the souls that are often willing to, go to their pocket and buy things for their classroom, just out of their pocket if that is not available in the school. The other thing that's very distinct about the believers, and this is a pattern that he discovered again in his study, is that there's kind of a clear pattern of like sinking down roots of, home ownership that was kind of in a reasonable proximity to the school. So, that kind of suggests that they want to stay in the area, they want to continue their employment. They've got some long-term goals of staying there. They might also have, ties to the community. And so those kinds of things bring a sense of stability and positive relationships to the students. Not necessarily that they absolutely live like within the walking distance of the school, but they've kind of sunk down roots in a reasonable area. So that tells you they're going to be there for the long haul. The other thing he noted with these teachers is that they tend to be rather flexible, which can be a very good thing, right? It was actually one of the most striking characteristics that came through in his patterning. He talked about how they like to individualize their responses to students in academic expectations and also in their classroom management. And he found that statistically, people who are believers, they write far fewer discipline referrals than, say, the fundamentalists, about 30%, of what the fundamentalists might do. They do have high expectations for student conduct, but they generally are very capable of using non-punitive measures. They rely on building positive relationships with their students, both, in the classroom. They use management techniques that are good. And often these are the people who try to solve issues in the classroom, and anything that's going outside of the classroom for referrals is pretty serious or a very severe problem. In other words, they take care of things in their own place. They're also pretty good at, as we mentioned earlier, about putting a little positive pressure on students. So they really let the students know you're not going to fail. It's not a possibility. And they use a wide range of strategies. These are the ones who will call parents. These are the ones who will move the seats to make sure that the students are being distracted. They'll work with students at lunch or at recess. They might offer positive incentives. They often spend time doing some tutoring or coaching after school. The key is that as he looked through his study and he looked at all of these believers, he found that they didn't have different performance expectations for each student. They expected every student to succeed, and they worked hard to really and truly scaffold that. The other thing that he found, though, that was really interesting, which is kind of a drawback, they are not really people who confront others. He found that in general, they're hesitant to speak out or challenge others. And really, the only time they kind of get on their soapbox is when something is really intolerable. But they tend to be kind of passive and permissive of others. Again, unless it's an extreme case. In other words, they kind of choose the flight or fight response. And the people that he interviewed, they often felt like they didn't think it was right to challenge the behavior or the belief system of their colleagues. So he talks about the fact that as leaders, when you're moving into a situation like this is where we can help some of those believers to grow. Because peer pressure can be a powerful influencer. And, if we have believers that are willing to defend their moral objectives, their professional objectives, and get into those conversations, it creates a healthier school culture. So he really feels that that's something that leaders can encourage the believers to do. As I said earlier, too, the interesting thing about it was that these people that are believers, um, they tend to be very consistent for their aim about having students succeed, but there was a wide variety of their level of teaching skills. And so one of the things that we need to think about too is that even though these are the believers, the ones that volunteer for things, they're the ones that step up to the plate. But if we're going to close that achievement gap, we have to instruct these people with a lot of professional learning so that they can actually do more to help their students succeed. So, getting them involved with the kind of things that you see here on the screen, getting them to learn about instructional technology, cooperative learning, differentiation, formative assessments, giving feedback, things that would help those people to really and truly become better teachers, that they can actually implement skills that matter. So I'm going to stop for just a minute there. I'd like you to just kind of think about the people that you work with now, people you work with in the past, and think about, you don't have to give me any names. I don't want any names, but I'd like you to be able to kind of tell us with the group, what are some of the things that you notice about believers that you know or have known? Do they fit his description of his research? And I have wait time, so you're going to do some talking because I'm tired of talking.
I right away when you were starting to go through it, I thought of a current coworker that's on my second grade team, and I think she's amazing. I have a lot of admiration and respect for her. She is quieter and like you could tell she's very strong in what she does and she's confident in what she does, and her kids respect her. You could just see it in the hallway when you pop in her classroom. But she's quiet about it too, and she's never outspoken. Like there was that one slide about they kind of are quiet. They can be a little bit what was the word? I'm missing it right now. When they don't, you said the flight or fight. I could see like this particular person isn't very confrontational, but yet she has her own opinions and she'll make them known to you if you kind of talk to her about them. But she expects big things from her students. She pushes them. She wants them to excel. She's very active. She lives in the community in which we teach. So she lives in Orland. She's very involved and she's on committees and she's very into trying new things. She's not afraid to if there is a new way of technology or something that we want to try, she's usually connecting with the people that could help her so she could try it in her classroom. And she's actually going to be retiring in a couple years, and I've admired that about her. You don't feel like she's somebody stuck in her way. There's so many great qualities about her, and I really do admire her. And I think she's a fabulous teacher, and she's definitely a believer by so many categories of what you just said. And then it made me reflect on myself too as a teacher. Like I felt too like I'm kind of on that cusp. There are things that were on those slides that I was like, that is me. Oh, that I'm close to that, or whatever. But yeah, it just I felt like I teared up because it's like it's a good thing to be a believer, and we need more of them. But there's always other things to pull out from them. I totally agree about that. But yes, right away there was somebody that I work with closely that I think is a true believer.
Anyone else have an example that popped to mind that you're willing to share?
I am very lucky. I work in a building full of believers,
Nice.
which is rare.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very rare. But I feel like the teachers in my building, new things come to us all the time. New initiatives come, new curriculum comes, new. And while not like we don't, as humans, like we don't love change. I don't know anybody that like loves it. But they accept that it's part of the profession and that, they have the mentality of either you evolve or you die. And so they're continuing to evolve with the profession. And when new things are presented to them, they're not immediately negative with it. It's not an immediately like, that's not going to work, or my students wouldn't be able to do that. Like, are they crazy? Like, have they show this to me in a classroom? Like, I don't believe this at all. They have the mentality of like, okay. Okay. I mean, I might be a little skeptical. I might have to live this. I might have to live and breathe it for a little while, and then I can form my opinion on it. And whether, I'm a firm believer in this new initiative or not. But I definitely admire that with the teachers that we have, and their willingness to the change and the new initiatives that we have, and that they're not so negative and already putting up all those different excuses of why it's not going to work in their classroom. They're willing to, accept it, live it, make it their own, figure out how to, like, this is what the district wants me to do. What does that look like in my classroom? What does that look like, at Edgewood? So that's what
I would agree that you are very blessed and that it's not the typical situation at all. Okay, so let's continue a little bit here. Let's talk a little bit about those tweeners, okay? And I love the names that he chose for these, but I think it's really cute. But so again, I briefly mentioned this as we started out the conversation, but he talks about the tweener as anyone who is new to a particular culture, right? So the most common ones, or what he would maybe call level 1 tweeners, are the ones that are fresh out of college or they're career changers, right? So they're brand new educators. And in his study, the tweeners that he was looking at, 91% of the people that he labeled as tweeners were these level 1 tweeners. And they usually have a gradual introductory period into the profession, anywhere from 2 to 4 years before they kind of get their sea legs. Level 2 tweeners are people that he described as experienced educators who move into a new school or a new district or even a new role. So generally, the level 2 tweeners don't usually impact the school environment in the same way that the level 1s do. With the level 1 tweeners, their introductory period is unpredictable. Like, a lot of things can happen in those first 2 to 4 years, and that can really shape their career and can shape the environment they work in. So basically, when they're starting to come in, the primary goal of level 1 tweeners is to find stability within the organization, figure out how they fit in, and get a lay of the land on the politics, right? So we're going to dig into some of these characteristics that you see here on the screen. So he calls these tweeners as loose connections, right? When you think about it, they're just fresh in the job, fresh in the profession. They don't have a lot at stake in their employment because, they realize that they've got a year-to-year contract, and that can be broken pretty fast, right? Pretty easily. In his study, he noticed that they don't really sink down roots right away. He said over 92% of his study, the tweeners were renters. And 70% of those had at least one roommate who was not a relative, okay? So he said this is kind of significant, Rich, because you think about it, when people sink down roots and purchase a home, it creates a really natural bond, and it's kind of a major step in that kind of sinking down roots. So in common language, he would say tweeners can kind of be flight risks, okay? Now, in his study, the median age of those in that he called tweeners was 24. About 18% were married, only 9% had children. And those are other factors that tend to create bonds, right, when you're sinking down roots and help you to promote longevity. So he thinks that this loose coupling makes leaving a viable choice anytime. And one of the things that he talks about as school leaders is that it's really critical upon the school leader to strengthen those bonds by initially and intentionally creating bonds with those teachers, getting to know their personal interests, intentionally placing them in a position that connects with their personal area of interest, such as maybe perhaps in the sports or in the arts, things like that. If you can strengthen bonds with these new teachers, that will help to make a positive school environment. The statistics are now roughly about the same, that about 40% to 45% of new teachers leave the classroom before their 5th year. That kind of a turnover in schools can almost be attributed to a quarter of the new teachers in schools that serve minority and students of poverty. So even worse in those schools. So those schools that really need the people to come in and sink down roots and stay there are really struggling to gather any momentum and how to create any change because they lose this organizational memory. If your membership is constantly turning over, then all of the training and the professional development, they don't have any long-term effectiveness. And school districts in that situation, you have to be proactive. You have to strengthen the bond between the school and the tweener. I saw a lot of this when I think it was way back when we talked about Brofenbrenner in one of the recorded presentations. But, when I talk about the schools that I worked with in the inner city, Chicago, when I was at St. Xavier and I was working with the inner city Catholic schools, in the schools where we saw a lot of this turnover, where new teachers would come in, they'd last a year or two and off they went, sometimes three. And we worked with some of the schools for up to 5 or 6 years. So we could see turnover here and there. Um, but what happens is you've invested all this time, and for us, we were investing all this time, all this grant money in purchasing materials and getting professional development, bringing in coaches, and then people would leave, and you're starting over again. So in order to have any institutional history, any organizational memory, it was very frustrating because it was like every year or two you were starting over again with a whole new group of teachers. Now, that being said, this group tend to be very enthusiastic, right? They really care about what they're doing. They are very honest that they didn't come into the field of education because they thought it was going to be where they're going to make great financial wealth. But they came in it because they had a passion for something. They were motivated maybe because of a teacher they had, or maybe because one of their parents was an educator. But they tend to say that they wanted, they not only loved their content, but they wanted to make a difference. They wanted to make a positive impact on society. So these tweeners tend to immerse themselves in the new culture. They tend to volunteer for committees. They always will kind of get into the staff social functions because they're trying to get to know people. They will arrive early and stay late, and they try to learn about their new environment. And that flows into their classroom too. They're really open to research-based methods. They pay attention to learning styles and different intelligences, and they're not afraid to try things in their classroom. They do really believe that their students can learn, but they're not quite sure how to get there. They're not sure that they can do that just yet for all of their students. So they have a lot of these really good qualities that we want to see and that are really refreshing to bring into our schools. The other thing, though, is that they tend to be very on that side of compliance. And that results from the fact that they have kind of a reverence and or maybe even sometimes a fear of the administration, right? There's nobody the tweener wants to impress more than whoever is the school leader that's going to evaluate them, right? Because this person has power over whether or not they can continue in their employment. They have the power of evaluation, which can be very intimidating, especially for these young ones. They're trying to find themselves, trying to find stability in this new organization. So a lot of times they really jump in there and they work really hard to be compliant with any directives. And this, they can almost be obsessed with pleasing the school leaders. And so, they want to be seen as team players. They want to be rewarded with a good evaluation. And so sometimes there's a barrier there, though, because their desire to please, and then you couple that with the school leader's desire to have a congenial and compliant staff, there's this wall of silence that can develop. And that the tweeners' true needs may not be available right away for people to see. So one of the things is, they often struggle and have private trials. These are the people who have issues with some classroom management at first, sometimes with the implementation of the curriculum, even the paperwork. And the fast pace of schools is hard because everything is so new to them. And they're trying to balance that and please the leaders and at the same time seek support without seeming weak. So they put on this public face of being very positive, but they're really living in two worlds. They've got this struggle and self-doubt, and they also have this false enthusiasm and positivity. And this often comes to a clash, right? This is also where tweeners are prime candidates for recruitment by the fundamentalists, particularly if they're vulnerable. This is where sometimes those rather political and rather negative and against change people try to almost draft these people into their little circle. So one of the things that as a future educator that he talks about is really critically important to know that you can't just rely on peers and perhaps induction people to make those tweeners feel comfortable. leaders need to get directly involved with these people in the early stage of their career. They need to know that the leaders are not only willing to listen to their struggles and understand that there will be struggles, but they're willing to support them. Um, Leaders really have to establish like a good ongoing mentorship for these folks. They need to be connected with stellar examples of professionalism, and they need to have access to those mentors on a regular basis. And the other thing too is that school leaders need to work to connect these new educators to the community, right? Taking advantage of the gifts and talents and maybe even their, their hobbies, and get them involved in things in the school community so that negative and frustrating experiences are kind of balanced with positive experiences that help them to weather these kinds of storms. The big problem with tweeners is the attrition, as I mentioned before. If our schools are going to survive and we're going to improve, then we have to get these people secure and vested in the long-term future. Many of our best and our brightest join teaching, but they don't stay. And that revolving door is incredibly expensive over time. There's something like $7 billion a year is invested as districts have to recruit, hire, and then retain and then retrain new teachers. The National Education Association has this really good quote. I'm going to read it to you. It says, "There is this idea that we can solve the teaching shortage with recruitment. What we really have is a retention crisis. As fast as districts are moving teachers into schools, the teachers are leaving." So they're important as a leader for a number of reasons. First of all, again, a school cannot gain momentum if it's going to lose its organizational memory. You can't have that long range continuity if things are changing constantly and things have to be revamped or scrapped because the knowledge and experience is going out that revolving door. If you have no memory, you simply, as an organization, you won't survive. And America's schools in general can't make progress if you keep replacing so much of your professional staff every 5 years. They're also really important in the school culture because they're kind of an opportunity. They're kind of a blank slate. And so as leaders, if you provide these new people with proper support and good experiences, they will be really helpful in changing the school culture. His basic recommendation for leaders is to remember that you can't leave this to chance. New teacher development sits squarely on the shoulders of leaders, and they absolutely have to be proactive, put resources behind the support and development of these new teachers. And if you do, it's going to really ensure their effectiveness as years go forward. So I'm going to stop there again, and I want you to think for a minute about tweeners that you may or may have known in the past, and your thoughts and some examples of that. Because I'm starting to lose my voice, so you have to talk.
I was a tweener because I'm like only a fourth year teacher. So I was kind of, every time you were talking, I was like, that's exactly how I was when I was a first year teacher. And then, like, obviously, I went down the path of not quitting before my fifth year because I'm now fourth year.
But you got connected right away with coaching, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did that help? Did it help your
Yeah.
transition?
Well, that I already did. I think it was more student council that got me there because then I was working with admin versus trying to impress admin because I was almost working alongside them for a lot of our major events and stuff. So I think that helped me feel comfortable and felt more like I just connect myself with the right people that made me kind of get to that leadership role quicker.
Okay. Did you have a mentor, an assigned mentor?
I did, but I never really talked to them. They never really came over to my room or anything like that. So I kind of just grasped onto whoever I could.
You found your own.
Mm-hmm.
Deb, were you going to say something earlier?
Yeah, so we have a few new teachers in our department, and it's interesting. There's two teachers who have never taught before. They didn't even student teach because they got the CRE license or something that you can get through Illinois. If you have like work experience and a bachelor's degree, you can get this CRE or something like that, where it's basically like explore classes, humanities classes. You can teach those. So one of them was a sound engineer, and he was a sound engineer for like TVs and movies and stuff. So he's seen like a lot of famous people. He has a lot of interesting stories. Um, and then he was hired last year, like as a last minute hire because um one of the culinary arts teacher left. So he came in and then so like I was his mentor and he like hadn't even student taught like nothing. I mean, but he's older, he has experience, he has kids. So like that was helpful because he knew how to talk to kids. He was really friendly. He had coached softball and or baseball and like basketball and stuff. So like there was a lot of things that he really naturally took to and then we kind of worked on the teaching aspect and curriculum aspect and stuff, classroom management and things like that. And then this year we hired his buddy to do like he like got his buddy who was a photographer to teach the photography classes. He got the same like CRE. So it's been really actually great for I think the mindset because um with teachers, like everyone else's teacher mindset going into teaching and they have this whole different perspective where they're just like so thankful to be there and like be at the school and they're like they get kind of like frustrated with the cranky teachers who are like, teaching as well. And they're like, this is amazing. Like, we have a job where we can come in the morning and then leave at night and go home for our families for dinner because their jobs were always like all over the place and like not 9 to 5 and and so anyway it's it's been actually a very fresh perspective but it is like one of the teachers was like, "Oh, I do want to like, yeah, like I really think this is how it should be, but I'm gonna wait till I'm tenured. Like, I'm not gonna like speak up now, So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
literally just today he said that. So I don't know.
So it definitely sounds like they're tweeners, but they're also very mature career changers, which can make a big difference.
Yeah, yeah. So they're definitely not that, they're not anywhere near 24. They're like 45 or something.
Oh
So
my, ancient. Oh no.
yeah. Yeah, I know. It's very interesting.
Okay.
But I've noticed a lot of growth in the culinary arts teacher. He just this year just has such a better, first of all, handle on his class because he was hired the day before school started. And then so that was just wild for him. And then so yeah, he's really grown a lot in his teaching and it's been cool to see.
Okay.
So
Well, definitely tweeners. Okay. All right, let's continue and go on with the next group that's so darling, right? Um, so let's talk about the survivors. Hopefully you don't know too many of these, but this is a small but very important group of teachers. And they're ones that Muhammad has labeled as the survivors, okay? And his definition of a survivor is someone who has totally given up on practicing effective instruction, and they focus their energy on surviving to the end of the school year, sometimes the end of the week, sometimes maybe even to the end of the day. Now, in his research, these people make up less than 2%. But if they go unchecked and they go unsupported, they can have absolutely devastating impact on their students and on the opportunity for their students to actually receive a quality education. There was a study you probably remember a long time ago. You probably looked at it when you were an undergrad at the University of Tennessee, where they looked at when students were assigned to what we would call ineffective teachers. And you can see that spending a year with an ineffective teacher still really had negative effects that were measurable even up to 2 years later. And that same study also looked at students who were with effective teachers, and those who had effective teachers, say, for 3 years in a row, they were at a very different level for achievement. So, poor and ineffective instruction can undermine the school's mission because even though you might have a good teacher in second grade and a really effective teacher in fourth grade, but if you've got a survivor in third grade, those children are going to lose. They're going to lose ground. And so one of the things that Muhammad is very passionate about is that school leaders need to put on their big boy pants and remove teachers who have become burned out or depressed from the classroom and address their issues. It's the best thing for the teachers, is what he says, and the best thing for the students. So let's talk a little bit more about these survivors. Um, these survivors are, they do what happens, I think, naturally in human nature. When you face stress and it's overwhelming, they retreat, right? They psychologically retreat away to get away from the stress. And we know, I mean, hands down, education is demanding. Being a teacher is demanding. The responsibilities we face, all of us at every different level, can cause extreme stress at times, even for those of us that are old and prepared and experienced, right? But there's a distinction here, because when we think about stress and we think about burnout, those are words that really we shouldn't use interchangeably. Because when we're stressed, it tends to be because we're worried and we care too much. When you're burned out, you don't see any hope for improvement, and you don't care anymore. And so burnout is what really triggers that flight response. And unfortunately, what happens to people who are perhaps trapped in these jobs because they don't have other options and they're fighting to survive, they often spiral into depression. Sometimes this is, with new teachers who are underprepared and they're placed in schools where there's a lot of, say, urban schools where there's a lot of high academic and emotional needs. That's kind of one area that can happen. Our neediest students are often described as at risk. And Muhammad, and I agree strongly with him on this one. I don't like that term. I think what we need to think about those students is that they're school dependent. Because if they don't receive certain academic and moral direction at school, the likelihood of them ever receiving it outside of school is very unlikely. So they're dependent on the school for those kinds of things. So this is kind of, that horrible situation that exists so much, and I've witnessed so much of it, is that you've got these school dependent students, and they're in schools where really they should be with really excellent teachers. They should be with really well prepared teachers who know how to deal with this, but that's really not it. Often the underprepared teachers are the ones that are in these schools, and you couple that with the high needs of those students, and it's just you get a whole system of survivors there. I saw a lot of this in the work that I did in the inner city. Um, and so when you think about it, it's detrimental. There was a study about 10 years ago that talked about, the negative effect on teachers, and the kinds of things that you look at, things that can produce negative effects are, whether or not there's job satisfaction, whether or not they intend to remain in the profession, their work hours and things like that. What's important to think about is that, and I know it's from experience, these people are dealing with things that are very, very difficult, and they shouldn't be ridiculed, and we shouldn't demean them or look down on them. Their situation is extremely real, and they really need help. And this is, again, where leaders really and truly have to step up. What you've got to understand is that these people are not in control of their emotions. They're not able to, their work life is spiraling out of control. They can't manage the behavior of their students because they're not even able to manage themselves. And it's really surprising in some instances that they even make it through day to day. They often are unable to deal with student behavior. And so they tend to start bribing the students with letting them do things that are maybe, let's close the door and nobody will know. I'll let you go on computers and play, or I'll let you do this with food. There's this kind of thing where they're trying to get the students to behave and give them, like, peace and quiet. Because basically they just want to be left alone, and they want the students to kind of leave them alone. So a lot of times they'll let them, use their electronic devices if they're banned, or they'll let them use the television for non-academic things. They let the kids bring food and beverages in the classroom when maybe it's not allowed. They might even say, give kids better grades if they'll behave, kind of thing. And so sometimes, I remember working in the inner city, and you'd come by some of these classrooms, and I knew from my observations and my interactions with these teachers that they were survivors, but they were able to bribe the kids to just sit there and be quiet and do nothing. Um, and that really fooled a lot of administrators that were walking around like, oh, that's a nice classroom. Everybody's quiet. They look like they're busy. Nobody's causing any trouble. So that must be okay in there. But it's not necessarily true. They kind of look like that on the outside, but nothing's happening inside, right? There isn't any teaching happening inside. When you're looking at pedagogical kinds of things, their whole purpose is to get through the day with their sanity intact. They are the people that don't often interact others with other educators. They kind of keep themselves, but when they do, they'll only talk about things that are more like personal. They don't like to talk shop. They don't like to talk education. Um, Obvious, the most damaging thing is they don't have good professional practice, right? And they don't even care. They really are generally not well respected among their peers. Some people feel sympathy from them, but the general consensus is if you ask people, they'll say that person really doesn't belong in a classroom. They don't belong in the profession. So how do organizations respond? Well, when you're thinking about it as a leader, you've got somebody who's in your building who's responsible for the well-being of students, and they're now spiraling themselves into a situation where they can't dig themselves out. Leaders need to step in and respond positively and swiftly. You cannot ignore or easily fix this. So the best a solution that he recommends, and one that I would agree with, is that you have to remove them from the conditions until either he or she can get proper treatment or can get some care or can exit the profession. But wishful thinking or turning a blind eye, pretending it doesn't happen is not going to solve it and probably make it worse. And so you can see some of the things that on this slide where different leaders have tried. We've seen this over and over again in the years that I've been in education. Sometimes they'll take a survivor and they reassign them, different grade level, different building, might even put them in a resource position. They might counsel them out of the profession. They might get angry with them and force them to cooperate in certain ways. There may be punitive measures that take place. And sometimes it ends up with termination and putting them maybe on a leave of some sort. So when you think about it, and you try to put yourself in this position, there is stress in schools, right? And it comes from working in schools and it's very real. And anybody can have a bad day. But when those pressures become overwhelming, they can really do absolutely genuine physical and psychological damage. These teachers can be in a non-productive, stagnant environment, but they can actually be physically and mentally ill as well. So one of the things that Muhammad talks about is that you cannot, as a leader, turn your head away from this and pretend it doesn't exist, and that you have to remove a survivor from a situation. And when you do, the classroom conditions dramatically change almost instantly. And so the most important thing is that we have to shield the educator from themselves, and you have to shield the children from further damage. Now, I had an experience I think I've shared with some of you before, as a first-year teacher. I had two survivors in my building in my first year as a principal. Not good, not easy to deal with. It took a lot of work. And I think when I think back, obviously in retrospect, it was really unfair of the administration above me to put me in that building when they knew there were two major problems in there, right? One that had been there for some time, and one that they transferred into that school was a principal that had been demoted for what we don't know why, but he was demoted on a closed door, board meeting, and then he was placed in my school. And here I'm, 29 years old and a very idealistic, short 5'2" little person, and I'm supposed to manage these people. It's very difficult, it took a tremendous amount of work. The one person I was able to develop a relationship with, I was able to give her support. I was able to help her to see that she really didn't belong in the profession. And so at the end of a year, we still had a relationship, but she had come to the admission that, I can't do this. And so we were able to make that change. The other one, the demoted principal, was a much more difficult situation. I had to apply a lot of consistent observation and pressure and trying the conversations but he was just not going to communicate, was not going to talk to me. But eventually he exploded, and he ended up yelling and screaming at a student and slamming them into a locker. And the student was a challenging student to work with, but not at all deserving of the way he was treated. And the kid bolted out of school, and the teacher never told anyone. So now you've got a sixth grader on the loose out in the community, right? And just thank God, one of the other teachers saw the kid go by and knew him from the team, and she stuck her head out and saw the kid out the door. And it ended up, obviously he was let go, right? We had to call parents, we had to call the police, we had to find the student. It was just a mess. But, he was someone that had really spiraled down and just really didn't belong where he was. So that's my example of two survivors. Do you have any that you can describe?
I think I work with the entire 2% that you said are survivors. So much of what you said like resonated with the challenges that we have with the numerous people. They're not reflective on what what's best practice, what's good for them, what's good for students. They repeat the same lessons year after year with no change. Like there's literally a binder and they just go through that binder every school year. If anything deviates, they get a new prep or something like that. Like all hell breaks loose and we do not hear the end of it until they get what they want. They're absolutely some of the most depressed people I've ever met. Like my building is myself included, to be honest. Like we're all on medications of some sort to deal with our anxiety and the issues that we have in our toxic environment. But these people are heavily medicated, but don't do anything to actually try and help themselves to be able to be more present and better for themselves and for their students. Um, they blame students for the lack of success that they see and they don't take responsibility or accountability for anything. It's always, well, I said that or I taught that. It's their fault that they didn't get it. Um, and they're also bribing kids like, I don't want to deal with you on Friday anymore. So we're gonna have free day Friday. If you have all your work turned in, you can play on your phone, you can do whatever you want to do. It's and what's really hard is I was really good friends with several of those people, and like my speaking out and up about like changing some of those practices and not doing those things anymore, like really looking at what's good for students and what's good for our I like that you said it's school dependent, not at risk. Our school dependent kids, because we are a high poverty school, um, cost me those friendships. And so now it's like a very narrow little place because, Darlene's going to call you out on stuff. So, then nobody wants to talk to me because I'm going to tell them about themselves as respectfully and professionally as I can because we can't do that to kids. Like, and just because they're 5 to 7 years from retirement, like you shouldn't have to just deal with that. Like we need to support the survivors so that they can do better because at one point they weren't survivors. They were good teachers who had all that love and lust for the job and wanted and were reflective and wanted to do all of those things. And then something changed and they didn't get the support they needed anymore. And that's what put them in that situation.
It's really interesting. I think you'll find the next group we talk about that maybe some of them were in that group and then moved into this group. So that's really, and thank you so much for being so vulnerable and sharing that. So let's go to the last group before we all start crying and get depressed. So, okay. So we've got the fundamentalists. And, you can tell by the picture that I chose to put on this page what I'm a little bit about what I'm going to say, right? So the believers have a lot of influence in a school, and then the group that has the second, or maybe equal, I would say almost equal influence in school are these fundamentalists. And so they are very different. So the fundamentalists are very experienced educators, and they kind of believe that there's just one pure way to practice. That's the traditional model of schooling. And they are vanguards of the tradition, and they want to protect the status quo. They are relentless, absolutely relentless in discouraging change. They want to protect a system that they grew up in that's old-fashioned and traditional, and it allowed them to actually function and thrive. They think that model of schooling is really that the system that was used to educate them is the best. This is where they were socialized. And so they think change in and of itself is an enemy. And anyone who challenges their traditional system is a threat. And they are very vocal and they are aggressive and they are combatants. And this is where the war of beliefs comes in. Now, Muhammad feels that after his study that any leader who's really interested in building a healthy school culture has to understand these people and how they operate. And they actually pose the biggest threat to change for the positive in a school. And, if an organization doesn't evolve, it doesn't improve. And an organization that doesn't improve is going to fail, right? They're just doomed. So they don't really intend to destroy or ruin a school. They actually believe that their way of thinking is the correct one. And they think that by standing up for what they believe in, they'll save the traditions, right? They'll save those old ways of doing that. And we obviously today, as leaders and as teachers, we're all being pushed to make meaningful change, substantive change, which means that some of our values and some of our practices have to change. And so this puts leaders in particular directly at odds with fundamentalists because they want the status quo. They don't want anything else to change. So let's look at some of these things that he says describe them. So first of all, obviously, their most distinctive characteristic is overt, blatant opposition to any kind of change. They kind of enjoy being professionals, especially in the beginning. They enjoy the traditional aspects of school. They speak fondly of the old days when there was things like, cultural corporal punishment, and we could design our own curriculum and local control. Some things that are kind of interesting about them. They've been socialized into education since they were in kindergarten. They've spent thousands of hours as students, and this is kind of what they call the apprenticeship of observation. So they've kind of been, they're kind of succeeded in this school when they were in school themselves, and so they feel like everything should be that way. On average, they tend to be good students, and they were, but they want to go into the school system and be the same way. So when you think about it, it's almost irrational for us to say that these people who benefited from an old traditional system, how are we going to convince them that they should be a catalyst for change? And maybe that's why they have such, reverence for these very old values and norms. And they feel threatened. They absolutely feel threatened. And, we think about it, our own personal experience is really one of the most important variables in how we become teachers. So they really cling to the past, big time. The other thing that we want to think about here is that there's this whole idea that, there's the old contract versus the new. And with these people, the thing that's really kind of interesting is these people really like, the old contract, the old norms and values, things that happened before we had this big accountability movement in schools. These people have seen the change going into a standardized curriculum, standardized assessments, proficiency ratings, and these are things they can't wrap their heads around. This is something that they just can't do because the old contract let them place the blame on the students, right? This really, in the new contract, we're looking at teachers have to take responsibility for things, at least an equal responsibility. So what we find is that these people who are the fundamentalists, they're not fans of anything that we would call, accountability initiatives. They don't believe that all students can learn. They don't see their stance as pessimistic or anti-student. They just think they're realists. And when you think about it, you think about John Hattie's work, and he talked about how the teacher's prediction of a student's success has a great impact on student achievement. The evidence is clear that if you have a pessimistic attitude and low expectations, it's really damaging for students. So when you look at that, he found that these people who fall into that fundamentalist category, they really believe in that normal distribution and that social stratification. They believe that some people are more capable than others. And that they translate this into their classroom practice, how they grade. These are the ones that assign only a small percentage of A's and give a lot of B's, C's, and D's, unless they're teaching in an honors class, And it's also reflected in their discipline patterns. They don't write an excessive amount of referrals, but they refer students who don't fit what they think is the profile needed. And so they refer, like at secondary level, they often refer a very disproportionate number of minority students and male students. At the elementary level, they refer students that they think are immature. And they are often the first ones to say the student needs to be out. They need to be tested for special education without trying any interventions. Interestingly enough, with the skill levels, they again here have a wide range of skill levels. Just like the believers, some of them have very high levels of knowledge and teaching strategies, some have very low. But some of the things that they value are what make it difficult for them, and they just can't promote a healthy school environment. They tend to have very negative dispositions and very negative opinions of their leaders. They are suspicious of leaders' motives. They're suspicious of leaders' even ability. Even the most effective teacher fundamentalist does pose a threat to the school culture, even though they might have pockets of effectiveness and proficiency, because they're not poised to embrace techniques and strategies that would help them to even be more effective. And those who don't exhibit effectiveness in the classroom can be even a bigger problem, because an ineffective professional who rejects change is a danger to the students and a danger to the organization. So when you talk about the warring paradigms, this is where a lot of this comes in with these people. They tend to be very active in the school community. They actively and consistently want to add to their ranks. This is where the tweeners are in danger. Because the fundamentalists want more people on their side, they want to gain political power, they want to have more people to support their belief system. So their commitment to achieving that end is more intense than our believers who kind of are quiet and not as aggressive. And when he watched in his study, when he watched the fundamentalists operating in different school systems and all across the country, he said they were savvy, they tend to be well organized, they were very determined, they were more emotional than rational, and they were more formal than informal in their actions. But there was definitely some things that were really things to think about. So when you're talking about emotional versus rational, they become, when they get into arguments, they tend to go with emotions rather than facts or data, because that's where they can come out as victors. If the believers are going to need any help with the change, they have to get these fundamentals into conversations, and leaders have to get them into conversations. You've got to stay away from the emotional battles because they really are ones that go for that. One of the things is that you can see that if believers really look at them and say, look, let's have a clear statement for how we want, why we want to change. Let's talk about how this really will be helpful, and state the goals. Use objective information, clear data, stay away from those emotional things, support things with empirical evidence, anecdotal evidence, those kinds of things, and convincing them that it's built for the education of students and keeping students at the center of the argument kind of makes it difficult for the fundamentalists to publicly, advocate for a stance that might hurt students. And it also kind of forces them to present a compelling argument and to stay away from their emotional kinds of situations. When you look at the fundamentalists and you think about their culture, they, you can see on the screen here, like formal organizations, there's official committees, SIP teams, curriculum committees. Informal organization, there tends to be a lot of these covert alliances. And when you look at it, it's often very difficult, but these fundamentalists like to work in informal organization, right? They have the meeting after the meeting or the meeting before the meeting. They like to have their own rules. You have to be really careful as a leader because there are conversations happening around you all the time, some formal, some informal. And, it's really important that staff members feel comfortable to express their views, but you have to make sure that they're under good norms and the values, right? Because otherwise they're expressing them in the privacy of an informal organization. So one of the things he talks about is important for a leader that give these fundamentalists an opportunity to voice their viewpoints and be prepared if you're going to refute their arguments by stating a better case, a public case, and backing it up with data. You can always extend an olive branch by encouraging intellectual dialogue and help them see that you're not trying to perpetuate division. And so you want to be really careful. But these fundamentalists can be pretty diehards. And he talks about what are some of the things that they do. And he found in his study that with all the different schools, their pattern was rather predictable. He said there were three primary methods they used to achieve their political ends. First of all would be what we call defamation. So in a stagnant, toxic school culture, fundamentalists would like to be the ones who I would describe as intimidators. And when they are intimidated in any way themselves, they use defamation, all out, sometimes personal assaults. And they would talk about, they spread rumors, they kind of fan the flames for scandal. And they choose this kind of tool because it's pretty effective in organizations. If the defamation doesn't work, then they go into this disruptive mode, delaying implementing policies and strategies. excuse me, sorry. So they try to make the case for avoiding change by saying, oh, we've done past things that didn't work. They try to say that, oh, well, I'm speaking for the majority here. I'm stepping forward and I'm speaking for those who will not speak for themselves. So they really try to get in there and disrupt. And then their last, and kind of their last thing of resistance is they just do distraction. So when they realize they can't stop anything, then they really kind of go into passive aggressive behavior. And I think maybe you will have seen some of these kinds of things. But these are the people that when you're sitting in a meeting, they're rolling their eyes. They assume a very negative body posture. They start grading papers in the middle of a faculty meeting. They start whispering negative comments and passing notes. And so they just do this kind of covert personal resistance. And all they do is try to annoy other people as kind of a mode of distraction and resistance. So, do you know any fundamentalists? See if your head's nodding. The point of this whole presentation is to, not just to put names on these people and, confirm your beliefs, but to understand that as a leader, you have to deal with these people and you have to think about strategies. I've just introduced you to a couple of the things that Mohammed has discovered in his research. I just want to show you. Actually, I should have gone one more slide to show you, but since that time that he wrote the book that I'm talking about, Transforming School Culture, he's written two more that are really helpful. One is all about, essential skills for school leaders in terms of change. And then you can tell he was very, very, very big about PLCs. This last book that he wrote is really it's almost kind of a memoir to the people who created, Dufour, that created the PLC books that you did in 620 and things like that. So it's something that I think is important to talk about because you're going to be walking into schools, you're going to be moving into different types of leadership positions, and you're going to find most of these people there. Hopefully not too many of the survivors. But as a leader, it's really important for you to support those believers and get them to be more vocal. It's important for you to really support those tweeners, get them on the right path, get them moving towards the right group, get them supported and committed and sinking down roots. It's important if there's a survivor in your building to really take care of them, both, physically and emotionally and professionally. And if you've got fundamentalists there, if you're working with the believers and you're working with the tweeners, you're going to gradually turn that tide. I don't know that you'll make converts out of them, but I think you can turn the tide. Any overall reactions, comments, questions? Did I waste your time this evening?
In one of our group discussions, we talked about some of the new staff that is coming in who they don't have that fear and they're very loud about what they believe in and they're very negative. What advice do you have dealing with staff like that?
Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean there?
So you'll have a staff who's not tenured, they're in their first or second year, they're in a staff meeting, they're just kind of giving that passive aggressive, they are rolling their eyes, they are the ones that are jotting notes back and forth, they're the ones that are asking questions in a more passive aggressive way, very negative about everything that is introduced.
And they're first
A lot
or
of
second
gossip.
year? They're first or second teachers?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you've got the leverage right there. They don't have to stay, right? So that's one thing, right? I think sometimes you have to put on, that hard hat and say, you're not fitting the culture of the school kind of thing. I mean, after the first year, I'm pretty sure it's still the same. You don't have to give any reasons for dismissing someone. I think there have to be some real hard conversations. I would, you'd need to know, like, have they been associated with mentors? Have they been screened well? Have there been some of these conversations? But when you put on that leadership hat, your ultimate goal is the protection of the students, right? So you get somebody in their first or second year and they're acting like that, you don't want them in your building because once they get in and they get tenured, they're going to turn right into those fundamentalists and they're going to just thwart things if they're already acting that way. So I would be, I would be really hard-nosed about it. Like, I would be taking notes on that. I would be having hard conversations about it. And, here's the things that I'm seeing that you're not fitting the culture of the school. And if not, then it's, goodbye. I know I'm a terrible person, but
Yeah, I mean, that's my viewpoint that obviously they've been there year after year. So that's not the viewpoint of the admin, but I have these conversations with them as well, and they notice it too. So I'm like, well, what are
yeah,
you gonna do?
you need to
So
take over the
thank
school, get rid of those admin and take over the school.
Stop.
Yeah, I don't have a magic wand, but I do, have some experience and I've 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 grown some tough skin, over time. And you have to, because you have to keep in focus what is your main job. Your main job is those students and their learning, and the rest of the people have to get on that bandwagon or get off. I know.
And Dr.
You would,
Spellman, sorry, you finish, you finish.
I was gonna say you guys probably wouldn't want to work for me, so.
I did have another question. I thought Meredith had a good question as well. But mine is like, if you know that a teacher is in a survivor mode only because what's going on in their life personally has been, they've had a lot of tragedy or personal things happen. Like their house had burned, a father who's very, very sick, and they're the only child, and they are responsible for taking care of their parent. They have a lot of things going on in their personal life that are heavy. And you know that they are a good teacher, they're a good person, and they have it within them. But every day they come and they can't give it their all because they are weighed down by all of their personal issues and what's going on in their life. And it's heavy stuff.
Yeah.
What is the best way to support a teacher who is in survival mode and you can recognize it, but you also know they almost can't help it because life right now has not been good to them? And they in turn can't leave their job because it might not be a good time for them or they don't know what other way to go. And they have been doing this for a while and they were good, but yet there's a period of time where they can't do it the way that they should only because it's not going well outside of school.
Yeah, you're truly between a rock and a hard place there. First of all, I wouldn't call them survivors, because the survivors tend to be, people that really weren't good in the classroom, right?
Okay.
So I think they're probably, there's another category, I think, with people that are just struggling so much with their own personal life. So I think, not knowing the person, not knowing the situation, but trying to get them some counseling, trying to get them, some support. If they really were a good teacher, is there a way that they could co-teach some of those things so that some of that burden is lifted from them? I think there has to, again, still be some hard conversations. And I know it happens. I mean, you life tragedy, and then it does impact your work. And it's easy to say you have to check your baggage, at the door when you come in with those kids, but that can't happen when you've got this constant drain. So finding ways for them to get support, to get counseling, maybe to get help with respite for care if they're caring for an elderly parent, looking at, almost like a social worker to help support them in terms of ways that they can get support and that kind of thing. And if they could be moved to a less stressful role for a while, those kinds of things, with the understanding that when they get through this crisis, then they can request moving back into a classroom. You'd have to be very creative, and you'd have to really sit down and have honest conversations with people about, we know about you, we care about you, we know what you've been able to do, you're not doing it now. So how can we support you so that you can deal with what you're doing at home, but also understand that we have to care for these kids too.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that, and that's so helpful because this person is a great person. But when you see that they don't smile anymore and you
Oh,
see them how burnt out they look at the end of the day, and when their classroom management has lessened. And that's the hard part. But everything you said between the conversations and seeing what support you could also help them maybe see that maybe they need to seek out or that you would be willing to help them with. I think that's great advice. But yeah, I've got someone in mind that I'm like, my heart hurts for that person, but you can't, it's like I almost like can't blame her because I know what she's also been through and it's nothing that she ever chose and
yeah.
it's heartbreaking. So, but you gave some great advice. So thank
But
you.
I think the honesty is the best policy, sitting down and having an honest conversation with someone like that, and starting with, I care about you and I know this and I know that. So how can we help you, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I could do that with somebody. I think that's beautiful. And I don't know if anyone's done that for her.
So
We have a faculty member at North Central who's going through a horrible time right now. Her young daughter is 10 years old, has been diagnosed with a severe, dangerous leukemia, right? And she's in charge of a lot of major things at the college. So we're helping take some of her jobs away. We started a food thing where we are all donating money for, where she can get food brought to the house so she doesn't have to worry about the cooking. So I think there's a lot of ways when people care and understand and know the situation that we can wrap around them. We can't take the pain away, but we can try and make it a little bit easier.
Agreed. Beautiful. Thank you.
So we've got some things to do tonight that are a little different. So I'm gonna before I put you back into your breakout groups, I'm just gonna remind you. So the when I have opened the ethical dilemmas section of our Canvas course. I want you to do something a little different tonight because you've already read this one in 500. So when you come, I want you to take maybe just a short break, maybe like 5-10 minutes at tops. And when you come back in, read it together out loud. Just do a little choral reading or take, popcorn reading and just read through it aloud. So you're reading it together, so you're kind of on pace because it's something you've read before. Okay. Use the same format of the, ethical dilemma, document. Work your way through the 4 areas. And then I'm going to kind of pop in and out and see how it's going. And then once everybody's gotten through it, then I'll open up where you can go in and you can get your notes from last time, and we'll do a little comparison of this is something that you did in 500. Let's work through it now with hopefully 2 years of.
Good.
Sorry,
she's back.
my internet crashed. Sorry. Okay. If that happens again, just keep going without me and I'll get back in. So you can tell I'm not at home. So it's it's a titter. I'm actually delighted we got this far without it crashing on me. Any questions about what you need to do tonight? So you're going to
We
take
didn't hear, like, after you said we're going to change it up, we didn't hear anything after that, or at least I didn't.
You didn't hear anything after that? Did you hear me say that you're going to go into your groups? You're going to read the thing along together aloud?
Yes, we got that far. That far.
Okay. And then you'll go right through and do the document like you usually do. I'm going to go in and out of the groups and make sure that what pace you're at. So I'll bring you back. We'll do a little bit of sharing, and then I'm going to put you back in your groups and I'll give you access to what you wrote 2 years ago. Good enough? Okay, so I'm going to put you in your groups, take a short break, and then read the dilemma together and get started, okay? All right. Everyone get one?
I don't have a group.
I know, I've got Isabel and Deb because you guys came in and out, in and out. I've got to put you back in. So Deb, you were in group 3. And Isabel, we're putting you in group 2. Did you get that? I assigned you to group 2.
I got it. Thank you.
Okay.
You want to read that book?
Sorry, Duchess Mama, we had a question. In the module, it says week 6 ethical dilemma documents, and then it says AIDS and age-appropriate education. The case study that's linked is cyberbullying in the middle.
Yeah, I didn't change the title. I should but the case study is the one, cyberbullying in the middle is the one you did in 500. I'll go in there and take the title off. The other
We
one.
don't remember the article, that's why we were all confused.
Yeah, no, the one that's in there is what you're going to do. I will go fix the title.
That's fine. We just wanted to make sure before we get started we weren't doing the wrong thing. Thank you.
Okay, all right, I'll go change that.
Sam felt distraught at the thought of being labeled by everyone at his school. And sorry, I can't see. And Sam cried, not Sam cried. Sam cried. Babe says they're in my pre-algebra class and I don't even know who it is.
After relating the story, Edward asked Dr. Webb to address this issue from within HMMS. That was too many M's. Clearly, Sam was being victimized, which was distracting him and affecting his pre-algebra grade. He demanded that Dr. Webb find the identity of Babe Alicious 555 and ensure that the student would be properly punished through expulsion from the school.
Oh, that's me.
Yes.
Hold on. Oh God, expulsion from the school. Okay. Wait, I lost my spot.
Mr. Wall, you're on page 2, top of page
Yeah,
2.
top
Stop.
of page
Mr.
two.
Walsh, Dr. Webb interjected. I'm very sorry that Sam has gone through this. However, other than referring to Sam to his counselor, I don't believe I can help you. This incident occurred outside school. I can't see how I have any jurisdiction. In fact, with the anonymity of the online world, we can't even be sure that this person is a girl, let alone a student at HMMS. I'm afraid I can't go on a hunt for the person's identity. And even if I found it, I can't suspend a student for things done outside of school. Edward had hung up the phone in frustration.
On reflection, 3 weeks later, Webb wished he had been more involved in helping Sam and his family. He had been thinking about the issue in terms of all students. The faculty had recently brought the issue of cyberbullying to his attention and asked if they could create an acceptable use policy that extended to cyberbullying outside of school. Still, he had felt unprepared to act. Today, however, he wondered if he should have been more proactive. That morning, he had received a surprise visit from the Walsh family.
In the 3 weeks since Dr. Webb had spoken with Edward, things had gotten worse. At first, all seemed better. Sam was more confident because he was no longer alone in the knowledge of Babe's DMs. He had thrown himself into practice for musical, which he was the male lead and was making friends in the cast. In addition, he spoke to his pre-algebra teacher, who allowed him to retake his last exam, which he passed with flying colors.
Everything changed, however, on the opening night of his play when during his big number, his voice, which had recently begun changing, cracked. Sam left the stage in a state of utter embarrassment, magnified because some of his classmates were in the audience. However, he forged on and seemingly forgot the incident until the next night when his parents granted permission for him to use his tablet to conduct research for a report he was working on in social studies.
When his mother left the kitchen, he clandestinely logged onto Snap for a prearranged meeting with a co-star who unfortunately was not the first person to find him. Babe Eilish's 555 wasted no time in continuing the reign of terror over Sam. Thought you'd want to see this queer. I'm sending it to everybody at school, said the message, accompanied by links to the video of Sam's voice cracking on several other apps. No, Sam yelled. And when Mrs. Walsh finally convinced Sam to let his parents watch the video, another message popped up on the screen. You've been flame fag, it said.
The Walsh parents privately inspected Babe's unprotected Insta account, in which the first and only post was the offending video, with about 10 derogatory comments under the video from various other accounts, which commented on how poorly Sam dressed, slammed him for being fat, shamed him for his lack of masculinity, and explicitly questioned his sexuality. Sam had refused to attend school the next morning, and truthfully, they couldn't blame him, but his parents accompanied him to Dr. Webb's office. Mrs. Walsh confided in Dr. Webb that they had entertained the possibility of withdrawing Sam from the school, but had decided against it on principle. Dr. Webb replied, I'm glad. That seems a bit hasty, don't you think?
Jarringly, Sam's father banged his fist on the desk and yelled, Webb, I asked you to help 3 weeks ago, and you refused. My son continues to be victimized beyond belief. You're not meeting his needs or keeping him safe. I have contacted a lawyer to discuss our rights in the situation. What do you intend to do? The very least, this babelicious 555 has to be identified and then punished. The worst part for Dr. Webb was the end of the conversation. Sam had looked him right in the eye and quietly begged, You have to stop this, sir. You have to. Please help me. Jack Webb had no idea what to do next.
Hey.
All right. I sent you guys the
thanks.
template.
Thank
Okay.
you.
I always do it in a DM because I'm never sure if it's gonna when I send to all, because those are the only two options. Send to all if it's gonna send to all in our in our small group, or if it sends to everyone in the class.
I have it.
I have it too. Thank you.
All right.
Awesome. Okay.
All right. Initial reactions.
I probably thought the same that I thought the first time.
I'm gonna say like is it on a I mean it's a question, but like is this a school? It's not on a school device.
So I don't know when this obviously was developed. I have an issue though with the board policy, which is what we'd have to reference. That's one of the questions. 7180 prevention and response to bullying, intimidation, harassment, it actually talks about that it could,
Mhm.
it doesn't necessarily have to, if it impacts school in a capacity, it's
Mhm.
kind of within the school's rights to, I mean, minimally, they should be investigating. They should ask some potential witnesses or people who might be involved to do some digging, just from because of the impact on the
Yeah.
student would be my initial gut. I'm not saying that they might get stopped along the way, but I feel like I think my initial reaction this time around is I think the school can still do more than what they've.
I think it's more of a, yeah,
Well,
I agree.
um,
Have we created a document?
Of course, my thing is frozen.
No? Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna put it in the chat.
my original reaction is the first time the dad went to the principal, the lack of compassion and empathy.
Mm-hmm.
I also feel as though, I felt bad for Sam, and unfortunately, I feel like this happens all too often.
Yeah. I didn't like the I can't suspend a student for things done outside of school because there are, I know there are some loopholes with that.
I
Did
think the
somebody start a
loophole was it
document?
was at a school event that he posted that video, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it was at a
Did
school.
somebody start the document?
No.
I will be.
Thank you,
Oh, wait, there we
Sarah.
go.
Mm.
I think one of the questions I have is what are the policies in place at the school for technology use?
Well, and he has his own tablet, so we know like an acceptable use policy for the school wouldn't work because it's not school property.
But in our bullying policy, like at my school,
No.
it does talk about technology use,
Yeah.
phones, tablets. So guess that's what I'm referring to.
Is it when it's
Okay.
on the school Wi-Fi? We have one like that. Like if you for us, if it's on the school Wi-Fi or use school accounts, it counts. Or it's like something they can look into because you're on public Wi-Fi.
And obviously, the principal said that we don't even know if this is a girl or a student at HMMS, but based on the fact that they recorded his play, clearly they're connected in some way.
Yeah.
What
So
were
I
some
guess the
questions we
question
had?
would be, what is the school's policy in regards to technology, like use, like I guess?
What's their bullying policy?
Mm-hmm. Um,
What are the state laws on cyberbullying?
Mm-hmm. Oh, what was that class where we had to look at all the different things that the state requires schools to do, and then we had to create like the lessons. I remember my
Oh,
group or my
the
part bullying.
that's the
I can't think of what class it was.
I remember what we did though. The curriculum mandates. It was like the new
Yes,
units of study. It was the units of study document that we had to analyze.
absolutely.
Mhm.
That's what it is. I
Yeah.
remember doing bullying.
Yeah.
I guess another question, if we're still on those,
Yes.
is have they like have what steps have they taken besides the school?
Yeah.
You know, like I think Meredith or someone said about the police, like have they gone to those?
Oh, Sarah, I don't know if you care, but we don't have editing access.
What?
I mean, if you just want to write,
Dr. Oh, sorry.
So the
Anonymous student.
explore the values, virtues, and or
Just
beliefs that may
just put
impact.
I just put in the username because I was like, I don't know, anonymous student.
Oh yeah,
Babylicious.
babylicious.
555.
I guess now I'm not. I think the username is coming back to me.
I think
Do you
that's what
remember
caught me. I was like,
babylicious?
I do recall that one.
You do remember.
Um, okay, so I just put those four stakeholders. Those were
I'm
like
trying
the
to think
main
of.
ones that stood out to me. Are there any
Yeah,
others you guys can think of
that's what I'm trying to think right
that are
now.
like
I
prominent?
mean, I don't know, like a
Safety
stakeholders
first.
would be like the rest of the class, like the other students,
I think
because
just
Yeah.
school
they
community.
receive, yeah, they're a part of it, right?
Okay.
I think school
Yeah. I
community.
mean, yeah.
Because didn't it say? I'm trying to remember what I read it.
Because they're getting like the video or whatever. They
Yeah,
may have
Oh, yeah, that's
received
true.
the video. So like their perspective might be like, should they may think, should I speak up? Should they be an upstander or a bystander? We've had so many conversations this last week about that with the kids. Like, are you going to be a bystander or an upstander? um, all right. Values, virtues, and or beliefs that may impact various stakeholder perceptions.
but I have so many windows open.
That gives me anxiety to have too many tabs open. But then I'm like
Oh,
constantly having to go back into like my browser history to open up a tab because I'm like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I needed that actually. It, it's a constant
I have to
battle.
work with two screens now. I don't know how to work without it.
yeah.
When I'm at my
Sometimes I like,
desk, I do have two screens, but like if I'm not there and I'm like, in a meeting or whatever, it like
Right.
I'm like, oh, and I need my mouse.
That explore values, virtues, beliefs that may impact various stakeholder perception.
I know, I'm
So
still stuck on that one.
for
I'm so
values and beliefs, um, impacting perception, I would say,
student
um,
safety or like
yeah, like student safety, and then also like other students might not realize or recognize that like this like cyberbullying can like be very like detrimental to
mental.
others, like mental health and just like I mean, like we see it time and time, like, all these like social media trends causing students to like physically and mentally get hurt or like push them, over the edge, and like risk their own personal safety. So it's like I think that's a huge thing, in this
It's
story
very,
too.
it impacts everybody differently
It does, yeah, you're right. It impacts everybody differently and how they see it.
and what they're going through or family. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any biases? Biases?
Um,
Um,
I can't think of anything.
I, I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily a bias, but it just seems like Dr. Webb doesn't know, like, I don't know if he knows like what's within his like scope to like do as a,
Legal uncertainty.
yeah, that's a good way to
There's
put it. Legal
uncertainty about because I
uncertainty.
don't know how can a school can they find out who it is? No.
I know that's what I was gonna say. Like, I don't even know how if they find like how would you even go about finding that? I don't know.
I think, yeah, in this situation, being an anonymous user, I think that definitely makes it more of a challenge. Because, like, otherwise, I feel like they would conduct some sort of like formal investigation. Because,
I mean, if it were me, I'd pull students individually to try to like I would start with the couple and be like, "Hey, have you heard anything?" Like, you know what I mean? Like talk one-on-one to a few kids, try to find out, like I don't
yeah,
even know where you would start. Maybe start with if you have
Wants the principal to give the strongest punishment.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the principal is biased because he believes that this is not the school's
True.
job. And
Is not happening during school hours.
Mhm.
yeah, even though
The play.
the play,
The play did.
I know, but he doesn't seem to think that's an issue. He seems to think, it's more the parents. All right, the people who own our moral issues.
Okay,
Our
so
principal,
principal.
Mm-hmm.
let's say, and the parents, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of went there too. I mean, they keep going. I mean, there are other avenues they can certainly explore.
All right, what decision would the profession expect? I feel like they would expect the principal to
By
do some sort of investigation
I
and some
think
support.
I think so.
and provide the student with support.
Counseling, social work.
Hmm.
I feel like anytime anything even like remotely happens, we're like, have they met with the social worker? So, what decision would the community?
I feel like this is more of if who's exactly impacted, like neighbors, like
Yeah, are we
who's
counting the
informed,
community as the parents? Are we counting the
students,
community as
the whole school, community, students, staff. I don't know. Oh, so please spare.
All good. We'll talk about who owns the moral issue.
Babelicious.
I'm truly, yeah. Who owns this moral issue? Is it the parents? Is it the principal? Is it both?
So, Illinois state law, see, I knew this,
Ooh,
requires all public and private schools to maintain strict anti-bullying policies that address cyberbullying, even if it happens off campus.
that's what
Oh,
I thought that. Yeah.
right.
So even though it's not happening at school, there are laws that say that you can't do this. And
Okay.
it is the responsibility of the school.
Would they probably
Sorry, I
work in
teach this.
conjunction with the police?
I'm sorry.
Would they probably work in conjunction with the police?
Well, I mean, I know at my district, if somebody has anything with the word bullying in it, so if we say, if a parent calls and says, I think my child is being bullied, automatically we have to go into an investigation.
Mhm.
So from that investigation, we will interview all the different people who are involved. And if it needs to be taken to whether it's SAS or the police or whatever it is, that interview process will determine the next steps. But I do believe that the school does have a bigger responsibility than many people know.
So based off of that, I feel like it's the school that owns this moral issue
That's
and
what I
not,
think so too. I was gonna say the school.
yeah.
And they
Okay.
should have.
Okay, so are we going with option A?
I think option A,
I
but I'm
think
really
so.
curious if we could figure out. No, I guess I'm also in the elementary level. Like this ha really hasn't happened because what tends happening for us is in hallways, backpacks, and school buses, and we have cameras. Which are the worst cameras? I helped my admin look for a kid. I'm like, how do you know? You can't even see.
When I Go
Does your
ahead.
final decision differ from your initial reactions?
Um,
I don't think so, but
I feel like no, because initially we had said like the issue was brought into school, and then um we also said like the initial administrative response wasn't insufficient. So I feel like we're still feeling that way, or like our final decision still still states that we believe like that it was brought into school, but like we are saying that like the administration needs to do more like in investigate. So like yes and no.
All right, I'm saying initial investigation, talking to individual students. Oh my gosh.
I'm curious what our
Um,
principal does.
and then depending, right? Like talking to individual students when the parent first brought the
Apologies for calling you back. I know some of you are still deep in conversations, but I want to honor your time and I want you to get mad at me with only 2 weeks left to go. So, um, interesting conversations. How many of you actually remembered the dilemma as you started talking about it? Usually when you hear Babelicious, people start thinking, oh, I remember that one. So, all right, if you go into the Canvas course now, I've opened up and you can go in and you can open the document that you submitted 2 years ago. I'd love to hear your reactions, your comments.
Do I not have this one because I wasn't
Yeah,
here?
you weren't in this group when you started with them, so you'd look at the one with the group you were with tonight. Yeah,
Oh, and I have that somewhere.
it's in Canvas.
Okay.
Has everyone found it? It would be right the next page after the ethical dilemma, and you'll see the 3 case studies are linked in there with the names of people that were in there.
Oh, okay.
So any thoughts, reactions, comments? Any differences between what you thought 2 years ago and now?
I'll say our answers now are more developed thinking, better words. Before it was just like boom, 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 but now it's a definite different thought process.
Yeah, a lot more depth in the conversations and in the notes that you submitted. Yeah.
Our group had a little bit more intention that after living this and particularly bullying under my role for the last year and a half, talked about how this school could obviously do a bit more than kind of the my hands are tied kind of speech, but we did focus a little bit more on, okay, let's say the school isn't really getting anywhere with the investigation, but they could certainly offer more supports for Sam at school, even if it's ends up not being directly related to a specific student, because he's obviously having a hard time. So that was a difference compared to our first one. Was that right, Ellen and Mary? Yeah, okay.
Meredith, do you want to cite the law that you found, the Illinois law or policy?
Sure, I just closed the tab, but
Oh,
there
sorry.
is
You can
that's
summarize
fine.
it. You can just summarize it.
There is cyberbullying is illegal in Illinois. And the law states that schools have to develop a policy about bullying and cyberbullying. And it is the responsibility of the schools, even if the cyberbullying is happening outside of the schools. So we had a discussion, and I teach cyberbullying, and I always tell my kids there's laws about this. So, but to find the actual law and remind myself that it is the school's responsibility to handle this was just good to jog my memory.
So was it a good experience doing this again and looking at your reactions then and now? Feeling a little bit more like you're ready to lead? Okay, I'm going to go over a couple of things. Remember Sunday, the video is due. Thank you to those of you that have turned it in early. I'm going to try and get a head start on watching those. Then the following Sunday is that short phonesis measure is due. I've gone through and I've opened up everything in week 7 and week 8 that I can that isn't restricted either by the presentation that's going to take place or by research dates that things have to take place with. So literally you can work ahead pretty much. Remind you that next Thursday when we meet, that's the day that your portfolio is due. Again, if you want to turn it in early, you're more than welcome to. So the things that won't open up for you yet are the next Thursday, I will open up the post DIT and the post writing sample. So you think way back in 500, you did that defining issues test with the scenarios and that kind of thing. You did it at the beginning and at the end of the first course. So you're going to do it again now at the end of the program. And you also did a writing sample at the beginning and the end of 500. You're going to do that same one again this time. So those have to be, because of their use for research and for program improvement, have to take place between Thursday the 19th and Wednesday the 25th. So you'll have that last week. And then you'll notice if you take a look at that week 8, even though we don't meet synchronously that week, there are expectations that you do the asynchronous activities and turn in your notes on that so that there's accountability for that. Any questions that I can answer?
Do we have to turn in our notes for week 8, you just said? Like, is there going to be a
I think if you look in week 7 and week 8, you'll see it's in there, and it's also in the syllabus. But let me see if I can find it for you quickly. Sorry. Let's see. So if we go back to modules and so if you take a look at week 8, your to-do list is you have to turn in your reflections on week 7 and week 8 asynchronous activities. That make sense?
Yep. So you'll make something in our grade so we'll have a place to enter it in.
Yeah. There'll be a place to put it in. So one other thing for next week, if you don't already have access to the free Chat GPT, would you make sure that by next Thursday evening you have that? You just create an account, the free account, because we're going to be using that next week in class. Okay. All right. I've kept you late. I'm so sorry. Meredith, can you hang on for a minute? I have a question for you. And I will see the rest of you next week. Don't hesitate to reach out if you got a question. And if I've forgotten something, let me know. I'm sure you
Dr.
will.
Coleman, just a quick question. When will grades be posted?
Well, your class officially ends on that February 25th, and then grades will be due the following week. But now that's not when your official transcripts and stuff are going to be posted or any of that.
That's what I needed to know. Okay.
Yeah, that's, unofficial transcripts will not be posted till the end of the semester. Because you're
Oh.
yeah, so it'll be like in May. Remember when Kathy Brennan talked about that last week?
Yeah, I guess I just before my district was asking, and I'm like, no, I finished class, so I could turn in something where it says my grade, official grade for this
You
course.
can turn in your unofficial transcripts, which you have
Unofficial,
access
okay.
to. Yeah, but it won't be
Okay,
official with the degree on it until May.
right, till May, so after, okay,
Good
perfect.
question.
Thank you.
But and I will have your grades turned in earlier because I leave for a conference on March 1st, so I'm going to have them all done before I leave.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
So you're welcome to turn things in early so I can do that. Okay. All right. Have a good night. Isabel, I'll let
Dr.
you know. I'll send you the recording. It's still recording. So
Okay.
I'm going to
And
stop.
then I have